someday be the CEO of my dad's company, I would have said, absolutely not. I mean, it feels like just yesterday that I started off as a senior executive at this company, and now I'm in charge of the place.
Lightman told reporters that he credits his continued success in business to a number of crucial moments in his career, including getting hired by his father's retirement, and a few lucky breaks in between.
I'm not going to lie to you, it was a lot of work. I was here for nearly 8 hours every day. Someone clearly saw my efforts and took notice. You know, a lot of young people ask for my advice, and I always say the same thing. Work hard, and it will lead to bigger and better things. That's what I tell my kids.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. You can bring up whatever you want and take control of the airwaves, as we do every night here on Free Talk Live. The number for you is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you tonight, it's Ian.
The nobody formerly known as Rich Paul.
And Chris.
So we got some interesting news in the crypto world to start the show out with. Plus, Chris, you have a story about Arizona where there's apparently a bill that's been put forward by a state senator to make Bitcoin legal tender. We can talk about that. Plus, El Salvador, there's an update on their Bitcoin situation down there. There's been a lot of attacks against El Salvador on an international scene because they have adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender. And that's what apparently Arizona's considering, or at least one senator is proposing. We'll get into that story. Plus, I do have the latest on the El Salvadorian case as well. But first, a little bit closer to home, there's a bank that was created in Wyoming. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar that Wyoming, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago at this point, passed a whole package of legislation at the state level that makes it kind of the freest state, or at least the most kind of welcoming U.S. state to cryptocurrency-related businesses. I can't explain to you what those protections are. It's sort of a regulatory structure, if you will, that a lot of these businesses, they really want to have in place before they will feel comfortable adopting the technology or openly working with the crypto technology. And so Wyoming did that stuff. They've been trying to borrow those ideas here in New Hampshire in recent years as well. So I think a couple of them passed last year, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I didn't follow them really closely.
How did we not talk about this last year or something passed?
I mean, I think we talked about it as they were working on the bills. I believe Keith Ammon was the individual who put those forward, but I don't recall as to whether or not they
I seem to remember that something passed, but it wasn't earth-shaking.
Yeah, it's just one of those regulatory bills. It's just like, hey, businesses, come locate here. It's not like it's going to, disconnect from the Federal Reserve or whatever. But that's what I wanted to talk about was the Federal Reserve, because in Wyoming, one of the things they did, and I don't think that we've aped this one in New Hampshire yet, one of the things they did was they made like a state-level bank, like what they call a special depository institution in Wyoming that you can form. I presume it's a little bit easier to do than maybe like a federal bank, for instance. And there's a crypto group called Custodia. They used to be known as Avanti Bank. There's a woman who is their CEO named Caitlin Long. Now, I happen to have met this lady. She was at the... she was at the... There was a series of crypto conferences that happened here in New Hampshire out on the seacoast for about 3 years.
Yeah, I went to one of those, I think. Yeah.
Bruce Fenton is the guy that put those conferences on. And they're really good, like really small, kind of intimate conferences, no more than maybe 100 to 200 people each year. And one of the people that attended was Caitlin Long. She actually happened to live in the Keene area at one time. She's a Free Stater, or was a Free Stater. She doesn't live in New Hampshire anymore, but she did live in New Hampshire. She had moved here, I believe, for the Free State Project, and she lived, I think, up in the Alstead area of the, kind of the Keene region, Cheshire County area. And so she was familiar with Keene and like the stuff that we were doing out here. So, it was nice connecting with her. And she had told us that she was in Wyoming now full time, and that they were doing some exciting stuff. She was the lady behind the efforts in Wyoming, the political efforts to get these laws passed to kind of shore up the crypto world, the crypto business world in Wyoming. So she's a real doer. Like, she's a go-getter for sure. And she's the CEO of what they are now calling Custodia Bank. And they have applied for membership. So they went through the jump through the hoops in Wyoming. They got the Wyoming Special Depository thing, whatever, that bank, special bank thing, determination or whatever by Wyoming, and had no problem doing that. And they've had that for a few years now, like 2020 or 2019. And so they did that, and then they applied to the Federal Reserve Board for membership. And it has been a couple of years, because a
really long wait, if I understand.
Yeah, it's been a long wait. In fact, they actually filed suit in June of 2022 against the Federal Reserve, alleging the central bank was unlawfully delaying their decision.
I think we've covered this story earlier. Yeah.
Apparently, there's a statutory deadline for what is called a master account with the Federal Reserve, which would give the institution direct access to their payment systems. So,
how many slaves can they have with that account?
That's a good question. They don't have the account yet, and it's been more than a year and a half or 2 years since they put the application in. So, just to clarify things here, their application for the master account is still pending. That's not what was denied. So, apparently they're still waiting for that, but they've been denied on what they are calling Federal Reserve Board membership. I guess that's something different. Maybe you can have a master account without being a member of the Federal Reserve Board. I'm not sure how all that works, but they have been denied by the Federal Reserve Board finally, as the Federal Reserve Board had made a statement saying that the crypto-focused institution's, quote, novel business model and proposed focus on crypto assets presented significant safety and soundness risks. The Fed added, saying, quote, Custodia's risk management framework was insufficient to address concerns regarding the heightened risks associated with its proposed crypto activities, including its ability to mitigate money laundering and terrorism financing risks.
Of course. This isn't the first...
Terrorism financing, they mean taxes?
Yeah, no, I don't think they mean that.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they mean that, but I could definitely see somebody interpreting it that way.
But your point you're making there, nobody, is that the government are terrorists by definition.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, this is definitely not the first time that somebody has tried to work within the system in quotes, and been denied by the federal government in terms of either licensing or what they were allowed to do. I remember, or maybe it was a credit union I'm thinking of, but either way, basically, it's all regulated, right, at the federal level, and they were.
How the hell do you work within a system that's designed to keep you out? That's the whole purpose of it.
Well, yeah, right, and that's exactly the problem that the other the story I remember from many years ago, and basically what they were allowed to do was effectively all they were allowed to do was issue loans to like rural communities or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, it doesn't make for a bank, right? You think you'd found a bank and then you'd be able to, like, I don't know, take people's money and hold it or whatever, mm-hmm. and do other things like checks and, but no, they weren't allowed to do anything other than like loan people money. It was absolutely
crypto related.
Well, which makes sense if they're not part of the Federal Reserve, because banks are required to hold a certain amount of reserves at the Federal Reserve based on how much depositor money.
So they were like basically denied because they were wanting to do stuff with crypto. Is what it came down to.
Okay.
And so they authorities, the regulators, were basically making it really, really, really basically impossible to do. Even though they'd done everything, they jumped through all the hoops. A year and a half had gone by, and all they could do was, issue loans.
Yeah, we're seeing this on all fronts, where it has just basically been made impossible by the system for anyone who actually wants to be quote-unquote law-abiding, for anyone who wants to jump through the hoops, who wants to, be protected by the system. They're just simply not, there's no path forward. There's no path ahead for these people. They cannot discern what the laws actually mean, how they're applying to their business, if they're applying to their business, in what way they're applying. And even if they mess up when they try to, navigate this, then there's criminal charges or the potential complete destruction of your business.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, the regulators have been given broad authority without any accountability, and then, of course, they abuse it and hinder people from, they hinder basically even end users, just the general public from, in many cases, just even having bank accounts or getting bank accounts if they don't like if you're part of a certain group that they regulators don't like.
Yeah, and the idea of having these laws that are just word salad, I mean, that's something that Ayn Rand was writing about in Atlas Shrugged. She wrote, "We don't write these laws to be obeyed. We write them to be broken because there's no way to rule free men. The only thing that a government can do is crack down on criminals. Well, if your society doesn't produce enough criminals, you make more. You make more and more things illegal until nobody can turn around without breaking one of your laws, and then you cash in on the fear."
It's interesting because this applies, basically to anything and everything. They basically write these laws to be impossible to obey, and then they come up with the systems to comply, and comply is in quotes because it's actually impossible to follow the law. And if you start looking at it,
they have to look like they're doing something, and then they have to own enough politicians that they'll never be prosecuted no matter what they do, unless, they tell the truth about Epstein or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just, it's impossible to comply with these laws, and they just, you have these systems that are set up, to comply, and often they cost money, and they're costly.
Right, imagine what it would cost to start your own bank, to go through all the hoops and hiring the lawyers and jumping through the paperwork and doing all the stuff you got to do to start a bank, only to ultimately be denied at the top levels. They built it all the way from the bottom, and then they said, all right, well, we're ready to apply for our Federal Reserve membership. We've got all our ducks in a row, right? Because that's not easy. It cannot be an easy process to apply for Federal Reserve membership, and then it's, nope, sorry.
Well, if it was an easy process, banks couldn't charge $35 for an overdraft.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, and this is not, like I was saying, this is not, we're talking about banks right here, but this is actually, you can extend this to all sorts of other laws, to just businesses in general, and just walking down the street in many cases, you could be committing a felony. What is it, 3 felonies a day? I mean, that's a
right.
common
what they say.
Quote. And
nothing is actually legal. It's just that some things are harder to prosecute than others.
Yeah, and of course, we're going to go in on Monday, by the way. I know I'm going. I don't know if anybody else is planning to attend. You are?
I'm planning on it. I failed to get to 2 other hearings, but yeah.
LBRY has what is supposed to be their final hearing. LBRY is the crypto technology company that is behind the LBRY network, the LBRY protocol, that is a media sharing protocol. It is available online. Anyone can use it, and you can upload and download various different types of media from it, including videos, audio, PDF files, other things. Very, very handy technology. And because of that, the SEC targeted them a couple of years ago and brought lawsuit against them saying, well, we think your token, the LBRY token, the LBRY credit, is a security. And then they basically bankrupted them on the process of taking them to court and having to hire all the attorneys that they had to hire and do all the footwork that they had to do there legally. Ultimately, to have the federal court rule in the favor of the SEC and say that the LBRY token is indeed a so-called security. And now they are going into what they call the settlement phase of this. And LBRY has pointed out, as they've been posting about this throughout the history of the case, is like, we tried to be good. We tried to jump through all the hoops. We asked the SEC multiple times, what do we have to do? What do we have to do to satisfy your requirements? Just tell us what to do, and we'll do it. And the SEC would never clarify what they had to do. It was just like, well, we're just going to sue you.
Well, the system isn't designed to control how you do things. The system is designed to keep the peasants out and the lords in.
Yeah, you know what's interesting too about the LBRY case is so often I hear people who are critical of cryptocurrency say, "Oh, well, you can't use it for anything," and it's like, well, hold on a moment. LBRY is a perfect example of a use. They had a use, and the government slammed them for effectively trying to promote decentralization, to undermine a monopoly, or well, I shouldn't say a monopoly, but a
big cartel.
I don't know if it's a cartel either, but certainly, certainly a big player in the market that's saturated the market for video, distribution. And there's not. I mean, how many competitors are there really to YouTube? Unfortunately, there isn't. There is nothing
at that level.
Nothing substantial. And this is a potential platform to basically compete. And here the SEC is trying to destroy anything that it's a free speech. It's really what it is a free speech issue. And they won't allow it, and they justify it.
They're trying to shoehorn this new technology into these old statutes that have absolutely nothing to do. Oh, well, this what is essentially free speech, as you pointed out. Yeah. It's programming on the internet. They're now saying is a quote unquote security. It's a stock. It's a bond. It's
but it's not.
But
the thing is, nobody expected to get value from the company itself because it wasn't tied to the company. It was a separate thing.
Yeah, and here's the thing: the company's going to go out of business because that's what's going to happen as part of the settlement, and the LBRY credits are still going to be there.
Right.
It's proof.
Right. It doesn't even stop it. It's just, the whole thing is absolutely crazy.
And that's just how it should be done. We should not be trying to hook crypto up to the criminals because the criminals destroy everything they touch.
And by criminals,
so don't touch them.
You're talking about the government.
I'm talking about the Federal Reserve. Okay. I'm talking about the regulators. I'm talking about the bankers, the banker scum who finance both sides of every war in history.
It's true.
The people with more blood on their hands than any other human beings.
It's a fact.
Monsters.
Yeah, I agree with you. But unfortunately, in order for these things to go quote unquote mainstream, the mainstream people are going to try to connect it to the mainstream. And that's what we're seeing happen here with Custodia Bank. This lady is a crypto person. She did work in Wall Street, but she's totally into the crypto thing. And you can't blame them for saying, I mean, essentially, and I can't speak for her, but my understanding of what they were trying to do is it's incredibly difficult for crypto-related companies to get a bank account, right? Like you can't just walk into a bank and say, "We just opened up."
What do you need a bank account for when you've got a crypto wallet?
Well, I get what you're saying, but there's still the challenge of the on-ramp and the off-ramp.
Yeah.
We still have to be able to get people to leave the fiat money system and enter the alternative. And in order to do that,
we know how to do that. You do it by buying and selling goods, preferably wholesale goods, for Bitcoin, and also buying and selling those same goods for cash. But you never trade cash for coin. You never trade coin for cash.
Yeah.
If you want,
but that adds an extra step. It makes it harder.
It does add an extra step, but that's okay because it's a barrier between us and the filthy economy.
So this is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of promoting the development of tools to help make it easier for businesses and individuals to accept cryptocurrency, because then you can as nobody here is saying, completely bypass the dirty fiat system, the government system. You don't need the banks necessarily, though. Something that it certainly, don't get me wrong, it helps onboard people, but you don't necessarily need it. And this is why the government's efforts, I think, are going to fail ultimately, but it doesn't mean it won't slow adoption.
I want to go to the phones here. David's on the line in Georgia. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, David.
Hey, great conversation, you guys. And a couple of things. First of all, you're totally right about the way to do this crypto thing is don't sell cash for coins and don't sell coins for cash. Do this whole goods thing like you're talking about. Horizontal scaling is the way to go. We don't need a Coinbase. We need a billion Coinbases. We need a billion people doing $10 transactions for restaurant payments and things like that, and local Monero and things like that. And like, I want to sell this this widget to you, and I will take Monero for this widget.
Mm-hmm. Well, even local Bitcoin is illegal. I mean,
well, that's what we did, and they came after us hard.
That's what the Crypto 6 did.
Right, that's the thing. They are trying to cover all of the possible entrances and exits to the world of cryptocurrency. I mean, I get what David's saying, though. If there were, 100,000 sellers on local Bitcoins, it would certainly be a much more challenging takedown for the government to go after all of them. But they would still target the prominent ones, and they would still make make an example out of them.
Europe's gone farther actually than the U.S. even in this regard, because I'm going to refresh people's memory here. You guys probably already remember this because I've said it, but Europe has actually gone to the extent of requiring identification by the intermediaries. So, companies like BitPay, for example, that merchants use, are forced to basically ID the person who is making payment to the business.
Just somebody buying at the business?
Yep.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
What's important about this, though, is the point that I'm going to make. It doesn't actually work if you are taking cryptocurrency directly yourself using tools like BTC. There's something called BTC Pay Server, and that will allow you to take like Bitcoin and at least Monero, or a fork of it,
without asking for ID.
Without asking for ID, because you are taking it as the business directly, as opposed to using an intermediary.
So you're not breaking the law if you do it that way in Europe?
I don't believe so. I believe that will solve the problem.
Well, give them time; they'll make that illegal too.
Yeah, that's
also,
yeah.
Go ahead, David.
Also, keep in mind, though, that, the U.S. might go after the 100,000 or a million sellers on local Bitcoins, but good luck prosecuting all those cases, especially when not all of them are in the U.S., when some of them are in Panama and some of them are in Africa and Zimbabwe. And
I think you make
all these people in all these different places. They can't prosecute that.
No, they can't.
All these people.
There's a good point here, and that is that even though they've targeted people, and Ian, they probably targeted even especially probably, or their benefit of targeting Ian is that he is a well-known individual, which means they get media attention, which means they get a message out there saying
this is dangerous.
Selling Bitcoin is illegal when it's when in reality the chance that they are going to come after you if you sell on what was local Bitcoin, I guess, isn't really, the risk isn't really that significant given the number of sellers and everything else. They're just targeting the biggest fish.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Well, not even the biggest fish economically, but the fish who actually speak out against the tyrant.
Correct.
For sure, it was a political attack against the Crypto 6, but
they're not going after the Winklevoss brothers.
No, it's not even necessarily the biggest fish that they're gonna. I mean, I think if it wasn't for the political aspects of it, they probably would have just gone after the biggest fish. But they did. It wasn't just that.
Well, now wait a minute. They did go after the Winklevoss twins recently. Gemini got sued by. I think they got sued by the SEC. The SEC, so not criminal charges, but the SEC said that their Earn program, where you could deposit Bitcoin and make 4% or whatever, was in illegal security.
I wish we could look up how many politicians they owned, because then we would know how many politicians you need to go from criminal to civil, and maybe if you double that, you can actually be almost free.
By the way, David, thanks for the recommendation on the Searx website, SEARX. There's like an open source search engine out there that he recommended, and I've been using it, and it's looking good so far. So thanks. Thanks for the call tonight, man. I appreciate the heads up on that. We've got more coming up here in moments. You can join the show. It's Free Talk Live. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here. And I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, D.C., I'm Benji Hire. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The U.S. condemned Friday night's shooting, standing, the State Department says, with the Israeli people in solidarity. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel and the West Bank later this month at a time of increased tensions, exacerbated since 9 Palestinians, including militants and some civilians, were killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. Elsewhere, the American city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing the footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. 29-year-old Tyree Nichols passed away 3 days after he was pulled over and beaten by 5 black officers earlier this month. Those officers have all been fired and charged with second-degree murder, assault and kidnapping. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Shelby County Courthouse.
There is no doubt here in Memphis that the egregiousness of this video, its staggering brutality, will bring people to the streets. What Tyree Nichols' family, law enforcement, and community leaders are asking for are for those protests to be peaceful. At this point, officials say they have no indication that violence is planned, but they are on guard. There is an increased police presence in the city. The few people who have viewed this video, including law enforcement and Tyree's family, have described it as heinous, inhumane. The family's lawyer saying that Tyree was beaten like a piñata. Tony Waterman, Memphis, Tennessee.
Voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls to choose their new president over the course of Friday and Saturday. Former Prime Minister and billionaire populist Andrej Babiš is up against pro-Western candidate and the contest's favourite, Petr Pavel, a retired army general. Both men failed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. It's 50 years to the day since the Paris Peace Accords, signed in the French capital, officially ended the Vietnam War, prompting an immediate ceasefire and the eventual withdrawal of American troops. Friday also marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the annual memorial for the 6 million Jewish people killed under Nazi persecution during the Second World War. The United Nations held a series of events and a ceremony in memory of the victims. From the UN's headquarters, Sally Patterson reports.
January 27th marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. It also remembers those killed in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Sally Patterson, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this...
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join us here. And you can bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you tonight, it's Ian.
Nobody.
And Chris.
You can join us online anytime you want. Head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the various features we have on the site there. Our chat server is chat.freetalklive.com. You can interact with other Free Talk Live listeners there. And it's available 24/7. You can get all the details on how to get signed up over at chat.freetalklive.com. We go back to your phone calls and thoughts, and then more about the continuing attack against cryptocurrency by the federal government, this time denying a crypto-focused bank from membership in the Federal Reserve System. But we got Olivia on the line in Arizona. Olivia, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hey, so I had 2 topics. The first one I'm going to be brief on, because last night you were discussing M&Ms that were geared towards women.
Yeah.
Which personally, I think most women...
They call those feminems.
That would actually be funny. But they it's such a slap in the face because it's such a token nonsense gesture. If you ever get on a forum or a comment on a post about things like this, women don't need this stupid pandering blather of, oh, we recognize that you're out there. Yeah, you recognize that we're out there. What we're asking for is pockets sewn into dresses and pants. We're asking for
Okay, I've got to ask you this. Why, I mean, why don't you just start your own company and start making clothes with pockets in them if you don't think there are enough pockets? And it seems like the world would beat a path to your door.
Yeah, I feel like I'd just be wearing men's clothes as a woman, if I was a woman.
I mean, that's what I do now.
Yeah, well, me too, but I'm a man.
Go ahead, Olivia.
Sorry.
I work in a fitting room in a discount store, the discount clothing store called Ross Dress for Less, and women more and more are buying men's clothing because the fabric is better. The prices are usually cheaper. The clothes last longer. They actually have pockets. More and more I hear women saying, I buy men's deodorant because it smells great, and the active ingredient is usually it's much stronger in the men's deodorant. They give you I forgot what it is, 5% active ingredient in women's deodorant. It's like 19% in men's deodorant. It's just the they were talking about razors are much better quality in men's than women's. It's just, and it's always, men's stuff usually is cheaper for better quality. And it's just, this posturing is so insulting, honestly.
Yeah, it's like, okay, finally, women, you finally made it. There's now female M&M spokes candies. You know? Okay.
They've been around for a while.
Yeah.
But we're not going to actually better.
The green one was kind of a hoe.
All right, Olivia, what else?
Well, not anymore. She wears sensible shoes.
Well, not anymore. They're shutting down the whole Spokes Candy division, apparently. That was the story from last night, due to too much controversy over decisions regarding their characters.
Oh, wow. They're sending them off to the home with Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
They'll have a good time there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They'll like those guys.
Okay.
Unless they get eaten.
All right, Olivia, what else?
The real reason I called tonight is, as you know, the Texas penal system is an absolute affront to humanity. And one thing that they do is, if you are a member of certain gangs, like the Aryan Brotherhood, or they have a list of them. Ironically, Crips are not on the list, but certain gangs, if you're a member, you automatically go into administrative segregation, which is basically isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you can get out, the only way out is they do have a program where you can be put back into the system, but in order to be in general population, you have to snitch on other gang members, which is really just asking for trouble.
Yeah, that's bad.
I mean, you know what's really messed up about that too is, like, there's this idea we have, in theory. I mean, and I don't know if I'm sure this has been like narrowed down to nothing, but freedom of association, it's in the Constitution. Like, you think you'd be protected?
You don't get that in prison.
Well, and I understand why you might not get that, because not all your rights are preserved in prison. However, if you haven't been convicted yet, you should have that right preserved.
I gotta say, as a periodic prisoner, I appreciate not running into the Aryan Brotherhood, because they and I would not get along.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm too dumb to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Plus, if you're pre-sentenced, Chris, they're not obligated to put you in with the sentenced offenders either, and they really probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
Honestly,
probably
be doing that,
but they do
sometimes. Yeah, that's true.
Well, it's really about they're already being punished by being put in prison, and their only crime is that to get this extra punishment of 23 hours a day, usually 24, because they don't have enough guards, so they don't get that hour of recreation, which is really just being put in a dog cage. It's not even real recreation. But their only crime is that they're literally locked into a 4x10 cell. And they literally start losing their minds. People have talked about these prisoners who are kept back. There's, according to the news story, there's over 500 prisoners who have been in isolation due to gang affiliation, and they won't recant, they won't snitch. They've been in there for over 10 years. They lose their mind. They become psychotic. They'll write letters home and claiming they're the king of Egypt, or all kinds of crazy stuff. If you get on Texas Prison Stories on YouTube, posted by Tim Snow, his latest video talks about a woman who's working with them, trying to help them because they're having a hunger strike right now. They've been on hunger strike for 16 days. The state of Texas has 13 because they don't count the first 3 days. It's not considered a hunger strike.
It never works. They just hook you up to like a food tube at some point. They'll shove a tube down your throat and feed you that way. If you get real serious about a hunger strike in prison, it's just not going to go anywhere.
Actually, they've been able. So that's interesting you say that, because usually it's like one person on hunger strike, and the way that they can do that nasogastric tube is they'll claim, oh, this person is mentally ill, and so for their own good, we're going to do this. But this is actually organized. There's over 70 prisoners right now who are doing this hunger strike. So they can't say, oh, this is just mass psychosis. So they're not intervening.
They probably don't have 70 hospital beds. Yeah, I get what you're saying there.
There's definitely a limit to what they can do if enough people are participating.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's happening as we speak?
As we speak, it's been, and I personally have done a 14-day water fast before. I got so weak I could not even turn over in bed. Literally, I could feel every cell in my body hurt. Like, this is not a joke. If you've ever fasted for a prolonged period of time, like, this is literal, almost, I don't want to say self-mutilation, but it's not, you read that and you're like, oh, they're hungry. No, you're not even hungry anymore. Your body is literally destroying itself. But they're like, it's not worth it. I'm tired of losing my mind. I can't go on like this. There's just nothing but these walls to look at. They don't get educational programs. The most contact they get is they get mail. And
yeah, I just pulled up the story here. Reason apparently just published a piece about this today. Texas death row prisoners are suing over automatic solitary confinement. The state's arbitrary requirement to house all male death row prisoners in permanent solitary confinement does not promote safety and security, is inconsistent with correctional best practices, and serves no penological purpose.
And if it's limited to men, it also violates the 14th Amendment.
Thanks for bringing this to our attention, Olivia. I do appreciate the call here tonight. The group of Texas death row prisoners is suing the state's prison system, arguing that its policy of holding male death row inmates in indefinite solitary confinement violates their constitutional rights. The lawsuit filed recently on behalf of a group of male inmates at one facility argues the policy has had devastating effects on prisoners' physical and mental health, and that the state has little practical reason to justify it. Quote, researchers have extensively documented the physical and psychological harms caused by solitary confinement specifically and social isolation more generally in a substantial body of peer-reviewed literature spanning decades. There is no longer any question that prolonged solitary confinement causes severe harm, according to the 45-page complaint.
Yeah, and I mean, jail in general causes a lot of psychological harm. This works out very well for the system because they have to keep the public frightened. And if people come out of the prisons twisted and just, guano loco, then, they're more terrifying that way. And then you really need the government to protect you from all these lunatics that have been created by
the system,
the government.
Yeah. It's interesting. I understand like the idea of segregating, but the way in which they do it is appalling. It's not like you've segregated a bunch of, people who've been convicted of murder that are going to be executed. You are keeping them separated from one another, so they have no human contact. And that's the part that I think it's so messed up.
Texas is, of course, not alone in automatically confining death row inmates in isolation. As of 2021, 12 states also practiced automatic solitary confinement for death row prisoners. According to the suit, these Texas death row inmates spend at least 22 hours each day in cramped 8 by 12-foot cells. They're only allowed to leave their cells on days when the prison allows for so-called recreation, during which they are moved to individual concrete and metal cages and permitted to exercise alone. Further, the complaint argues the state has no justifications for such harsh measures. Quote, defendants' arbitrary requirement to house all male death row prisoners in permanent solitary confinement does not promote safety and security. It is inconsistent with correctional best practice and serves no penological purpose. The effect of the policy has been devastated. Several of the plaintiffs in the suit have been in solitary confinement for decades, with one plaintiff serving almost 30 years in solitary confinement.
See, I'd just start killing guards. Any chance I got, I would kill a guard.
I'm pretty sure they're not going to give you any opportunity to kill the guards when you're in solitary. But I don't know. You guys have more experience with this than I.
They have systems to prevent these things from happening. Due to their isolation, plaintiffs have reported dramatic declines in their physical and mental health, such as significant weight gain, hypertension, depression, and PTSD. Further, prison officials have made it incredibly difficult for these inmates to get appropriate medical care or access their lawyers. Medical visits, quote, are sporadic, and mental and physical health providers are often forced to converse with their patients openly on the row, the complaint leads. Legal visits can take weeks to schedule and occur in a public setting where conversations are easily overheard.
See, actually, what I would probably do would be sue them to and attempting to force them to provide me with what I need to commit suicide.
It's an ugly situation.
It's because my church considers it a sin to live a worthless life. So if you render my life completely worthless, then I'm going to find some way to go out with a bang.
Oh, yeah. It seems such a waste of a life, just suicide in general.
It does, until you consider that being in prison till you die, I mean, every day that you have to live between now and the end of your life reduces the aggregate value of your life.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm trying to say, nobody, is that if you're going to go out, I'm not saying
in prison it's better to die yesterday than tomorrow.
No, I guess what I'm saying is it would be nice I'm not advocating for, but it would be nice if you were to commit suicide, right? There would be some sort of moral outrage by the public, and things would change, right?
They wouldn't even know about it,
right? And that's the unfortunate.
They might if
part,
I
right?
sued.
Well, if you're dead, then you have no case.
Well, no, but I'm saying that if I sued
to die
for
commit suicide.
The right to commit suicide, they might never know that it had happened, but people would know that case had taken place.
I suspect it probably won't go anywhere for a bunch of different reasons, but I guess primarily that you have to have generally a basis for the lawsuit. Otherwise, where's it going to go? I mean, they're not just going to...
Basis is First Amendment, free exercise. My religion requires that I not live a worthless life.
Freedom of religion. Maybe freedom of religion,
if you render my life worthless, I am obligated to end it.
Yeah, I don't know.
The lawsuit is the latest example of a series of attempts to curtail the use of solitary confinement in Texas prisons. Inmate Dennis Wayne Hope, who's been in solitary for almost 30 years, asked the Supreme Court last year to take up his case, alleging this practice constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Currently,
obviously it does.
Several inmates in Texas prisons are on a hunger strike,
his mistake, of course, is he thinks that the scum that runs our government actually cares about the Constitution.
Well, there's just only so much you can do, so if you can bring a lawsuit, you might as well bring the lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to him for doing it.
Prolonged solitary confinement is an endemic in U.S. prisons. As of July of 2021, almost 50,000 people were held in isolation in U.S. prisons, which is around 3% of the total prison population. In Texas, almost 4,000 people are estimated to be held in isolation, and over two-thirds of those inmates have been held there for more than a year. David Fothey, the director of the ACLU's National Prison Project, told Reason, quote, decades of evidence shows the irreversible physical and psychological harm long-term solitary confinement causes. There is no defensible reason for prisons and other detention facilities to keep using long-term solitary confinement, which is recognized as a form of torture. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to do this to someone just because they're on death row. I could understand that they might say,
we're going to murder you, so we're going to have to torture you.
Yeah, I could understand the argument at least that, well, they have nothing to live for, so therefore they're more likely to be dangerous. But until they show that they're actually a danger, they don't belong in any kind of solitary.
Yeah, the moral crimes of government, I think, tend to be far worse than the typical crimes that people end up in a cage for. There might be some exceptions with some serial killers out there, but like,
how many serial killers have killed 1 million people over the course of 10 years?
Yeah,
and that's just in one country. That's just Iraq. It doesn't even count Afghanistan. It doesn't count death squads in South America. It doesn't count the CIA all over the world whacking people for no apparent reason.
And that's kind of the humorous thing about it is that you have a government where its employees are literally dropping bombs on families and children and women and wedding parties and things, overseas. And it's like, you killed 50 people at this wedding. And it's like, okay, that one person that, that hit that button. And now multiply that by all the people in the military, or at least a good percentage of the people in the military. And it's like, let's just get rid of the military. I mean, we save far more lives.
And then at the very top of the organization, the pinnacle, the principle that brings them all together is a senile child molester who spends most of his time lecturing us about how a mentally ill person shouldn't be able to own a .22 when he is armed with nukes.
Yeah, the idea that you're going to convince these people to do the right thing with their facilities is, it's hard to believe at best. I do wish them the best. I hope that they are successful with this lawsuit. But this has been decades in the making. This guy has been in there for, according to this other story at the AP, the guy that was in there for 30 years, or a different guy that was in there for 30 years, has spent 21 of them in solitary confinement. These guys have been waiting for their entire lives for this one opportunity to file this lawsuit, and only now it's happening. This is just such cold comfort, even if it does finally happen.
Yeah.
And
There's no gang of criminals as bloodthirsty as the government.
According to the AP story here, it says the prisoners have been on hunger strike since January 10th, so what Olivia was telling us about, to protest the solitary confinement policy. They say it's unclear how many have taken part in the hunger strike, with activists estimating the number at several hundred at the start of the strike, and the TDCJ, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, saying that it is about 70. As of this Thursday, 9 of them, which is yesterday, 9 were still on strike, according to Amanda Hernandez, a spokesbureaucrat for the TDCJ, and none of the inmates who have participated have needed medical care. So,
does it say what prison they're in?
Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Actually, I just happened to get a letter from somebody in that prison a few weeks ago. He wanted me to set up the Securus account. For listeners that don't know, Securus is a prison jail phone messaging system that
it's another way to rob prisoners.
The poorest, of course, people. They hijack the prisoners for as much money as they can possibly extract from them, just to get them to give them the ability to call their mom.
And then they turn your lawyer calls over to the prosecution.
I bet they do.
They have been caught doing it.
Oh wow. Yeah, so Securus, he said, okay, well, you can go and set up an account, and here's my info. You got to put in the prisoner's name or their ID number, and you can search for them and add them to this instant messenger. I guess they're getting tablets in the prison or something like that, and they can text message you basically over a very controlled system. And so
very curious how that works.
I went. It's just a Securus software. They've got it on their end, and then you use it on your end.
Software, but there's also wetware, which is your email first goes to a guard who reads it and has to approve.
Of course.
That's why I'm kind of really curious how that works. Instant messaging, it probably
it's not instant messaging.
No, I thought you were saying it was instant messaging.
Just messaging.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I understood. Because
like
those messages are going to be delayed. They must
and maybe
have
it'll
to
get
be
there the next day. If you send an email on Friday, maybe it'll get there Monday.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's got to go through somebody's hands first.
Yeah.
So I went to the Securus site, and I thought I'd already had an account from whatever in the past, but I didn't. So I set up an account, and then I went to the e-messaging thing and tried to get in there. Found the prisoner's name, But then when I went and I clicked add to contacts, it came up with an error saying, we're sorry, but this isn't working. You need to call our technical support department at this number. So
God.
Okay, here we go. So I called the technical support department, and they said, well, can you try our app? Because I was trying to do it through the website.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, well, whatever. I've already got government spyware on my phone, so sure, I'll try the app.
More won't hurt.
Yeah, right? So I installed the Securus app on the phone, and then I try to go through the whole process again, and the same problem comes up. I got to the guy's name, tried to add him to the list, same error comes up on the app. So I call him back. And I knew this kind of crap was going to happen. It's just this technology is crap, right? Like it's just government. It's not a government company, but it's a government contractor, and they make a ton of money. So they don't care if they give you good customer service or not. They're rolling in the dough.
But they only care to the extent that they're making $1 off you.
Right, but they don't even care that much because they're making a ton of dollars somewhere else. So it's like if they piss you off, it doesn't matter. So I call up the second time. And I get somebody on the line, and I tell them what happened. I told them I already tried this and that, and they said, "All right, well, contact our support through the website." So even though the website told me to call the support number explicitly, the people at the support number say, "No, send us a support email through the website." So I go ahead and I do that. No response. It's been 2 weeks now since I sent the support email, and then the dude in the Texas prison, he writes me another letter. So at this point, I've written him a physical snail mail to send him back to him.
I was going to say, are they still allowing that? Because I know a lot of prisons are not doing. They're not even allowing you to use a snail mail anymore.
Me specifically, because I'm a
no, not you specifically. Just in general, they've banned traditional mail being allowed into the prison.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I was reading about an article about it here. Just I don't know, within the last week, I think it was.
That sounds really illegal, and I hope somebody sues them over that. That's insane.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's lawsuits involved, but
yeah, there's going to have to be on that one. So, but anyway, the dude wrote me back, and he thought that I was denying him or something because I hadn't added him to the list. He was kind about it, but you could tell he had his feelings hurt over me not adding him to that list. So I wrote him back explaining, "Hey, look, man, this is what happened. It wasn't me, man. I was trying to add you, but the system isn't working. I don't know if it's that their system just sucks or if they know that I'm like pre-sentence federal person. I'm on some sort of no-go list. Who knows?"
Out of curiosity, did it ask for some sort of ID in order to get into the system? Like
I don't. I mean, it wants to know who you are, but I don't think it was a social. I don't recall that.
Because otherwise, it's going to be like, you could easily get caught up in a blacklist of some kind, right?
Yeah.
So another Ian Freeman, could be on the blacklist, and you're being denied. But it wouldn't surprise me if
always go out and buy a $20 cell phone. I mean, it depends on how. I don't know how well you know this guy.
No, I've never heard from him. I'm just a guy in prison that listens to the show,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're on the air in Texarkana, where there's a Texas prison. That's where this TDCJ prison is located. So those guys are listening to us when we're on the air in Texarkana.
Nice.
So yeah. Anyway, the number here is 603-283-6160. I also in my email back, or not email, my physical mail back to him, I gave him the landline, the prison call-in line here. So if he wants to call us collect, he can do that. Anyway, you can join us here. Hour number 2 is on the way. You can bring up whatever you want. Is Bitcoin going to be legal tender soon in Arizona? We'll talk about it.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, D.C., I'm Benji Hire. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The U.S. condemned Friday night's shooting, standing, the State Department says, with the Israeli people in solidarity. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel and the West Bank later this month at a time of increased tensions, exacerbated since 9 Palestinians, including militants and some civilians, were killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. Elsewhere, the American city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing the footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. 29-year-old Tyree Nichols passed away 3 days after he was pulled over and beaten by 5 black officers earlier this month. Those officers have all been fired and charged with second-degree murder, assault and kidnapping. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Shelby County Courthouse.
There is no doubt here in Memphis that the egregiousness of this video, its staggering brutality, will bring people to the streets. What Tyree Nichols' family, law enforcement, and community leaders are asking for are for those protests to be peaceful. At this point, officials say they have no indication that violence is planned, but they are on guard. There is an increased police presence in the city. The few people who have viewed this video, including law enforcement and Tyree's family, have described it as heinous, inhumane. The family's lawyer saying that Tyree was beaten like a piñata. Tony Waterman, Memphis, Tennessee.
Voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls to choose their new president over the course of Friday and Saturday. Former Prime Minister and billionaire populist Andrej Babiš is up against pro-Western candidate and the contest's favourite, Petr Pavel, a retired army general. Both men failed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. It's 50 years to the day since the Paris Peace Accords, signed in the French capital, officially ended the Vietnam War, prompting an immediate ceasefire and the eventual withdrawal of American troops. Friday also marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the annual memorial for the 6 million Jewish people killed under Nazi persecution during the Second World War. The United Nations held a series of events and a ceremony in memory of the victims. From the UN's headquarters, Sally Patterson reports.
January 27th marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. It also remembers those killed in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Sally Patterson, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at heightened tensions between Greece and Turkey. The Turks are accusing the Greeks of provocative actions over their armament of some disputed islands in the Aegean. Ankara has protested the move, saying it breaches agreements signed in 1923 and 1947. But the Greeks have won US backing, with the Biden administration proposing to sell Athens F-35 fighter jets. Stephen Cook of the US-based Council on Foreign Relations says the domestic politics of Turkey, where a presidential election will take place in May, is playing into the current uptick in rhetoric.
The Turks really have engaged in this rhetoric and warning that the Greeks are arming these islands in violation of international treaties. A lot of this is really electoral game playing, that President Erdogan is in the unusual position. He's relatively politically weak going into polls. in head-to-head races with a number of other leading politicians, he loses. So he's been pushing every button and pulling every possible lever to garner support. And, Turkish nationalism is one of those things. And the Aegean and the Greeks are an obvious place to push these buttons and pull these levers.
But the Greeks and the Turks have come close to war 3 times in the last half-century, with disputes over both territory and human rights continuing to simmer between them. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
A reminder of our top stories. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The US city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protest, with law enforcement releasing footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. And voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls on Friday and Saturday to choose their new president. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington, D.C.
Congress today passed a landmark Social Security reform bill they estimate could save the troubled program billions. The so-called Grab Life by the Balls bill includes provisions to cut the cost of cigarettes in half, outlaws helmets, and adjusts the CDC's recommended amount of sleep from 8 hours a night to when you're dead. The bill's short-term initiatives aim to immediately cut Social Security costs in half by replacing senior citizens' monthly checks with vouchers for grain, alcohol, and extreme sports.
I got this coupon to motocross over a canyon. Better do my part to help the deficit.
Supporters in Congress say the cost will be offset by the so-called pussy tax on products such as sweaters, vegetables, hand soap, and flu shots.
America, would you rather die old, broke, and forgotten, or die a mother-f***ing legend?
The new program follows in the footsteps of the Life is a Cartoon Medicare campaign, which encourages seniors to run full speed off of cliffs and smoke sticks of dynamite.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the second hour of the program. You can join us here and you can bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, you've got Ian.
Nobody.
And Chris.
We were made aware, and we're actually going to go to the phones here where somebody was going to tell us about this, but in Memphis, Tennessee, apparently there's some breaking news about a man who was killed by multiple police there in Memphis, a police beating. He died some number of hours or days later in the hospital. We're going to go to the phones here. Rob is on the line in Vermont. You brought this to our attention. Rob, what's going on?
Yeah, I saw this video. It came out sometime after 7 o'clock this evening, and I knew that this was going to happen because they've been telling the public that it's going to be released at a certain day and a certain time. But this video takes the Rodney King incident to a different level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they just
the fatal level for one thing.
Yeah, I mean, they literally just killed this guy. I mean, they beat him. They took the metal rod that they use.
Mm-hmm,
extends out.
Yep.
They beat that guy with this while he had handcuffs on.
Mm.
And when they were done, they just take him and they put him up against the car. And then nobody tended for him for at least 10 or 15 minutes that I saw on this video.
Now, these guys belong in solitary confinement for the rest of their lives. Not an hour out, not a minute out. Throw live rats into their cells and let them eat that.
This is what's really disappointing about this now is that, Ian, this is a thing now. It's a 50-50 chance if you get pulled over by the police or accosted by the police, whether you're going to live or whether you're going to die. That's the way I'm seeing it now, and a lot of other people are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
It's so disturbing on so many levels.
Guy on Twitter today was like, why do black people run from the police?
Yeah.
And people of all races, of course, run from the police. And my response was, because they don't want to be murdered. And he said, well, that's a lazy answer. And I said, well, I didn't know you wanted a complex lie, so I gave you the simple truth.
I think a big part of the problem is that a lot of people have never seen anybody go through the system. They don't know how it works. They don't know how messed up it is. They have no idea. They've been brainwashed into thinking police good. Go tell a police officer if something happens, right? And it's like, no, that's not what you want to do. That's the last thing you want to do.
Absolutely the worst last thing you want to do. I can think of like 5 or 6 cases where a woman has gone to report a rape, and the cop she was reporting the rape to raped her again. It happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
These people are monsters.
Yeah, there was a couple of officers in Manchester a couple of years ago that they literally were raping women, and they basically it was eventually revealed that this was happening, and I think they were fired. I believe the both of them were fired.
Wasn't it when they were forcing themselves essentially on them while they were running the jail van or something like that, and they were giving like the women were getting favors essentially in return for
it may not be the same story that we're thinking of.
You're talking about Manchester, right?
Yeah, Manchester.
Okay, yeah.
But this kind of thing happens all the time, so it may not be the same.
People with power will abuse it.
The point that I want to make is that
if you're a psychopath, what's the perfect job for you? Cop or soldier?
They gave these people their jobs back years later after I think it was a lawsuit by the police, and it involved some sort of I'm trying to think their unions, and it's like, how do you give these people their job back? These are the people that should be caged
as a suppository.
Yeah, not the women that they were threatening. Threatening.
Robert, did you watch any of this footage that came out yet?
Yeah, I've watched it. That came out like in different videos.
Yeah,
and they're just gradually releasing to the public because it was said even by their own governor of that state that people are going to get into an uproar when they see this. I would only
and they should. I mean, they should be having another January 6th right down there right now. They should be breaking into the Capitol building. They should be finding somebody and making them hurt.
I would only say that the peaceful people that are protesting, that there's a way that they can infiltrate what's going on in their towns, in their cities, and that is that the people that are peaceful, that really want change, they have to run for those elected positions and get those people that are in there.
But they'll never win them because the whole system is rigged.
Well, but it's going to take this movement of people have got to come in there and get those awful people out. The people that are in these government positions now, they all sleep in the same bed together. They all know each other. Get those people out and let's get some fresh blood in that really want change.
Thank you, Rob, for the call tonight. I don't think violence is going to be the solution here to the system, but I also understand nobody's point that the system is inherently corrupt, and what you see happen is anybody that gets into the system becomes essentially neutered by the system. I mean, we see so many of the so-called liberty reps here in New Hampshire, but not a single one of them has proposed, abolishing the state police. Right? Like they know that it would be politically unfeasible. That's their excuse. Even if they do quietly support that, they can't ever come right out and straight up support it. Our guy, Matt Santanastasso, who's the most pro-liberty rep of all of them, put forward a bill this week to abolish the war on drugs. It's the first time any bill like this has ever been proposed, I think, anywhere, to actually completely end all drug prohibition. It would strike the entirety of Section 318B, which is all about the Controlled Drug Act. That's it. It would just get rid of it completely. It is as principled of a bill as you could possibly ask for. And you know what? no one except for Bonnie and me showed up to testify in favor of it. Not a single other state rep, not a single other libertarian activist came out to this bill.
That is... And I mean, I got to take a couple steps back from this, because this is the first I've heard that there was a time to go, that there was a hearing that I could have gone and testified at. As a matter of fact, the next thing I was going to say is, let me know when they testify on that, because I want to be there.
Yeah.
But I can't understand why I didn't see that on Twitter or something. Or
I don't know.
Somewhere.
We
need a way to make that not happen.
If it had more support, you would have seen it, right?
It's true. It's true. I don't know. I think there is to some degree a matter of getting the word out in advance. I mean, look, we have had lots of people show up to different events at certain points, and sometimes it's hard to get certain information out there. You got to work at it, and if you don't work at it, even significant things I think that would be supported, people don't find out about them, and then they don't go. But there's also
groups,
a lot of people.
So if there's something related to like lockdowns and COVID, there's like a number of groups, Reopen NH and I don't know what they're all called.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Some of those are pretty expensive groups, though. Some of those are pretty expansive groups, though. So it's not just one group.
Well, they are, but I'm saying there's a communications network that exists there.
Oh, right.
And that's why
we're missing that.
Hearings are well attended.
Yeah, you have a good point. And yeah, this is definitely a true statement. We are still lacking, I think, to a large degree, the tools to organize, which is really bizarre.
The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance had it in their newsletter.
Okay,
that went out over the weekend.
Definitely good.
They come out with every week. We talked a lot about the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. They look at the bills. They grade the bills on whether or not they're pro-liberty. This one had a pro-liberty rating, so it was rated by the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. And it was announced just like every bill. If you on the weekend, they sent out this email. It's got a whole list of all the bills that are coming up the next week, on what days and what committees at what times and what rooms. So anybody that wants to go has the information. If they're on the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance email list, you just have to take the time to read through the email and see what's in there and see what these things are. So there must have been some number of hundreds of people that are on that email list, I presume. I mean, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is a well-followed, volunteered for group, but not a single person showed up.
I mean, I
except
think
for me and Bonnie.
I think individually for the individual bill, it's not good, but at the same time, looking at things from a larger perspective, we do have people showing up to these hearings. A lot of them.
I'm not trying to say people don't go to other hearings. I'm saying that this was a principled piece of legislation that isn't some nibbling around the edges of decrim on marijuana or something like that. This would have stricken the entire war on drugs, and not one state representative could take the time to go out and back up Matt Santonastasso on this piece of legislation.
I follow you.
Not a single one of them.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah. Not a single anybody.
I guess I have some level of understanding, which I would have loved to go and testify. That would have been the point of it to me, because it's not going to pass.
Of course not.
Until we have a lot more actual human beings in the legislature.
And that's probably the number one reason why people would tell you they didn't do anything about it, because they knew it had no chance. And so why waste the time on something that has no chance?
I have an argument to that. Why waste the time? Because it gets publicity, right? And it's not necessarily it could have, right? It gets publicity and it draws in more people, and next time around we'll have more people to have an impact. And
seems
this is
obvious.
This is working, right? Like, it's not even like this is not working. This is something that is working, and I think a lot of times I think bills like this type of bill, it's not going to pass, but it doesn't matter, because what it shows is it demonstrates what we're doing in New Hampshire and why you should move to New Hampshire.
We didn't have any problem packing a room for secession, which also had no chance of passing. So how is this different?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think
secession was pretty promoted.
It was really well promoted.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff about that.
I personally sent, I can't even tell you how many messages I sent to people letting people know. And I've done that on a number of occasions, but I didn't do it on this bill, right? And I think that's a lot of times it's you kind of have to. There's only so many events that people also have time to attend, right? There is a lot of hearings, and if you don't make a stink, if you don't let people know, if you don't say, hey, are you planning to go?
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh, well,
They won't know.
there's a whole bunch of other things I've been to. I only have so much time.
Sure.
And, I don't know. I do agree with you. It would be really, really nice to see more people attend more often this type of, hearings.
Hey, people
got
to work. I understand. It would have been nice if one other person was there.
It would have been.
Maybe 3,
Yeah.
4 people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
Something.
believe
An email list that just sent out announcements of every testimony opportunity.
It's the New Hampshire
would
Liberty Alliance.
probably be-
They have that.
Yeah.
Every weekend
via
they send.
email?
Every weekend they send an email with all that stuff in it.
I can tell you why
I
I
wish
didn't.
we had a mailing list to promote their mailing list on.
Yeah, right.
NHLiberty.org, I believe, is their website if you want to go sign up for it.
I can tell you why I didn't attend, and I was planning to attend, and it's because I got a life too.
Yeah,
and
everybody's busy.
there's only so many things I can do because I've only got so much time.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Now I know that wasn't targeting me, but
no, I'm not targeting anyone in specific. It's just like, hey guys, this is a pro-liberty bill that is the most hardcore pro-liberty bill you could possibly ask for. In my opinion, we need more legislation like this. We need legislation that proposes to abolish the entire liquor commission. We need legislation that proposes to end the state police. We need stuff like that. Now, I understand we're not there yet to where those things can pass, but at some point, those things have to be put forward.
I think what if we pitched the VIP tent from PorkFest out in front of the State House and ordered a bunch of pizza?
You could.
Just had a pizza party out there while people were between testifying.
People do that. There's lobbying organizations that do that kind of thing.
Abolishing the liquor commission.
Usually during the nicer months, but then again, they're not voting at that time.
It might not pass, but I think that would be. That seems like it would be. That would be huge. That would be awesome to abolish it.
Would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good bills.
But the problem is most of the state reps are playing politics, and they don't want to use their quote-unquote political capital on something that they know has no chance of getting through. All these old curmudgeons up there, these Democrats and Republicans that have no vision for liberty. They don't understand what needs to happen in order to achieve a free society. They're not interested in that, and they're going to stay that way until they die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it. I get it. I understand why people didn't want to back him on this. I mean, essentially, Matt Santonastasso is such a principled liberty
He's leading the way.
guy. He's leading, but no one's following. That's the thing. He's the first. He's sort of taking up no, he's not the first. He's taking up the mantle of the principled guy in the state reps. There was a guy before him, Dick Marple. Now, he was a little bit more kooky, quote unquote, but he was also this sort of lone wolf up there who was proposing things that he really thought were important, and some of them were pretty good.
Yeah, definitely.
Were a bit more of a kind of a sovereign individual mindset. But Dick was the same way. He would put his name on legislation, and not a single other state rep would co-sponsor it. And then when the legislation would come up, he'd be in the room all by himself, and the only other person who would talk about it would be me.
Yeah,
and that would be it.
I remember going to one of Dick Marple's bills actually, and I was the only one who showed up.
Yeah,
not even Dick showed up. That's kind of the human. But I don't know what happened. Somehow he didn't end up making it for some reason.
I just saw him the other day on. I was watching a couple of Court TV videos.
Yeah, he passed away.
But he was on Court TV. He was on Court TV. His hearing. Where
right. Okay, I follow you.
Where he's doing. Maybe not the sovereign citizen thing, but question the jurisdiction of the court.
Yeah, I don't think he was a sovereign citizen. I think he was. He kind of had some of that slant to him, but I don't think that's what he was. I think that's a mistake.
But he did one thing. He got arrested for driving without a license.
Yeah, which is why I think they assumed he was a sovereign citizen.
And well, he used some of the arguments that they used.
Well, Dick's smart enough to know that there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen.
Yeah.
That's a contradiction in terms.
Yeah,
you can't be a sovereign and a citizen.
If you're sovereign,
at the same time.
you're not a citizen. If you're a citizen, you're not
sovereign. Right.
Yeah.
So
a citizen is owed a duty of care in return for his allegiance. And since the Supreme Court has repeatedly let us know that they have no interest in defending us, they don't care if we live or die, then we owe them nothing.
Yeah. Look, you guys are absolutely right.
They could owe us any. They could make us owe owe them something by providing a service we never asked them for anyway.
So you guys are right, though, about the hearing wasn't promoted very well. That much is true.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that is there isn't really, I mean, there's a marijuana decrim / legalization movement. There's different organizations that surround that here in New Hampshire, but there's not really any other kind of anti-war on drugs for the whole war on drugs movement here that I'm aware of. I mean, there was one attempt.
If you go into any marijuana organization, though, you'll find at least some number of people who will say, let's get rid of it all.
Sure.
Or other people who would say, well, I don't think we should legalize these other things, but if it makes me free, I'm down. You know?
Yeah, you could recruit from those organizations. I'm just saying there is nothing else that I'm aware of.
Well, the other thing I would say is reach out to those organizations, make sure they get a mail and they know so that they can reach out to their own members.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I see why it can be very hard to be optimistic, year after year after year. But I don't know. I mean, we're slowly making progress overall. And
I'm optimistic. It's just hey,
you're one of the most optimistic people I know.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I mean, we are, like you said, there's more state reps than ever before, and we finally have one that's willing to introduce legislation like this. So I mean, thank goodness. It would just be nice if we had a second one, to back him up.
It would be.
I mean, so come on, that's all, Liberty reps. Like, come on, man up.
Yeah, I do feel like you have to start somewhere, especially some people who might not be as crazy as maybe Dick Marple. And I think Matt is a good person. I mean, he's a good person, I think, to sort of lead the way in going in a more radical direction as opposed to what the left and the right do.
Yeah, and they did form a nullification caucus recently, so that's a new thing. That just came about. There was a lot of talk about it for the last year, and now it's finally happened. Of course, the question is, how many members is it going to have? We don't know that detail right now. Is it going to be 3 guys sitting around a table, or is it going to be 10 or 12 or whatever? Is it going to be something a little bit more...
All 400 state reps.
Obviously not, but is it going to be a little bit more significant? That remains to be seen. But are there other nullification caucuses in other state houses around the country? I never heard of them. So we are definitely leading the way
for sure.
On a lot of fronts, and there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, but there's so much more room to grow. There's so much more room for other organizations, other groups that can focus on, like I said, ending the entire war on drugs, because that still needs to happen.
I think if we have another 8 to 10 years, I think we're going to be I think it's almost hard to believe where we're at right now, honestly, just given the 5 years that I've been here. And it's like, we went from not even a single rep being willing to talk about a secession to actually having a constitutional amendment proposed and voted on. I remember 5 or 6 years ago going to protests, and it was like, okay, 5 people show up to a protest, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? This isn't going to accomplish anything. But as time has gone on, and as we've gotten media attention, and even before that, we've seen numbers go up, and every year we see record numbers of movers. We see another 10 state reps, the free state reps, every session or every 2 years or so. And we've gone. I mean, we got about, I think it's 50 state reps right now that are actual free staters, so people who moved for the Free State Project explicitly. But there's another 50 or so good, solid, liberty leaning reps as well. And we need about 133. I think to really kind of to begin to really change things, where we will have more reps than the Democrats or Republicans alone.
You said 133 is the number?
Isn't it 133? Yeah. Well, what's 400 divided by 3? Something like that.
Okay.
So I mean, that's how I'm doing the math.
133 and a third.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to the story here about this police situation in Memphis, Tennessee, where you have multiple, and I think it's worth pointing this out, black cops killing a black man, right? Because usually the stories that get the media attention are white cops killed black guy. And there was some rightful protests that went on in the summer of 2020. You and I attended a few of these here in New Hampshire in various different cities. And those people were rightfully upset about police violence, but the focus was on violence against blacks when we know the police violence is directed against absolutely everyone. And It's a power issue, not a race issue necessarily. Now, there are some racist cops, no doubt. No doubt. But
in general, it's not black versus white, it's pig versus human.
It's who they can get away with hurting is what it comes down to.
Right. And in this case, it's going to be hard for them to get away with this one because not only did the officers have body cams on, but there's also a pole camera that is above all of the action in this case that captures one consistent wide shot of everything that goes down. More coming up.
You know how annoying it is when someone keeps stopping mid-sentence as though he or she were asking you a series of questions? Avoid doing that. It sounds unnervingly tentative, and it imposes upon the listener to help you complete the thought. And if you're a job seeker, this alone could be a deal killer. An effective communicator sounds more confident. Complete the thought. Avoid making the listener impatient. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. Cutting through the clutter rather than blending into the blah, blah, blah will help you connect better no matter what the conversation. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook. Survivalspeech.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, D.C., I'm Benji Hire. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The US condemned Friday night's shooting, standing, the State Department says, with the Israeli people in solidarity. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel and the West Bank later this month at a time of increased tensions, exacerbated since 9 Palestinians, including militants and some civilians, were killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. Elsewhere, the American city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing the footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. 29-year-old Tyree Nichols passed away 3 days after he was pulled over and beaten by 5 black officers earlier this month. Those officers have all been fired and charged with second-degree murder, assault and kidnapping. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Shelby County Courthouse.
There is no doubt here in Memphis that the egregiousness of this video, its staggering brutality, will bring people to the streets. What Tyree Nichols' family, law enforcement, and community leaders are asking for are for those protests to be peaceful. At this point, officials say they have no indication that violence is planned, but they are on guard. There is an increased police presence in the city. The few people who have viewed this video, including law enforcement and Tyree's family, have described it as heinous, inhumane. The family's lawyer saying that Tyree was beaten like a piñata. Tony Waterman, Memphis, Tennessee.
Voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls to choose their new president over the course of Friday and Saturday. Former Prime Minister and billionaire populist Andrej Babiš is up against pro-Western candidate and the contest's favourite, Petr Pavel, a retired army general. Both men failed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. It's 50 years to the day since the Paris Peace Accords signed in the French capital officially ended the Vietnam War, prompting an immediate ceasefire and the eventual withdrawal of American troops. Friday also marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the annual memorial for the 6 million Jewish people killed under Nazi persecution during the Second World War. The United Nations held a series of events and a ceremony in memory of the victims. From the UN's headquarters, Sally Patterson reports.
January 27th marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. It also remembers those killed in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Sally Patterson, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this...
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
This
is Free Talk Live. Phones are open if you want to join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And you can join us online anytime you want. Just head over to freetalklive.com. You can support the show, as Roger Paxton has done. He's a gold-level supporter of our AMPS program. And he did that over at amps.freetalklive.com. That takes you over to our Patreon. You can get signed up there with your debit, your credit card, your PayPal account, and you can help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live if you like what we do here, if you appreciate our mission to spread the ideas of liberty, freedom, peace, and cryptocurrency and things like that. Then please, you can join the show. Join us over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Roger's doing gold, which is $10 a month. We only ask for $5, so thank you, Roger, for the double up there. Definitely appreciate that. Thank you to all of our supporters over at the AMPS program, amps.freetalklive.com. You get some perks like access to the AMPS only podcast, which includes the full radio show without any of the recorded commercial content. So once again, that's amps.freetalklive.com. We got a heads up tonight. One of the things that I love about doing an open phone show is if there's some sort of breaking news, a lot of times we have no idea, right? Like we're in the middle of our conversation, we're talking about whatever things we have to talk about, but there's something happening in the world and you want to bring it to our attention, all you got to do is pick up the phone and let us know. We had Rob in Vermont call and give us a heads up about a story breaking out of Memphis where footage has now been released from the Memphis, city of Memphis. It's on their official Vimeo account. 4 different feeds, 3 from police body cameras and 1 from a pole camera at a location in Memphis where a man was ultimately killed. He wasn't killed on the scene, but he was given a life-ending beating that then resulted in him dying 3 days later, according to the story here at Huffington Post, which I'll share the details with you. And I did watch some of this footage. It's pretty intense. But we do have Major Payne on the line here in Michigan. You're on Free Talk Live, Major.
Yeah, the lawyer for the family said he was beaten like a piñata. And if you've ever seen a bunch of crazy kids with sticks wanting candy, that was a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, I did see in this footage, you can see an officer, certainly from the wide angle on the pole camera, you can see at least one officer kick this young man in the head at least twice from what I saw, and then they hoist him up at one point. They're holding him up, and then another, it might have been the same officer or a different one, I'm not sure. I've not been watching it closely, but another officer punches him in the face. There's another officer that hits him with an asp. And I'm sure there's more that I haven't seen.
An eye for an eye, a kick for a kick, a punch for a punch, and a death for a death.
Well, eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Nobody. I don't think that's going to be the solution here.
No, because most people will never murder anybody under any circumstances. You know,
that's because it's anti-human to do that. I mean, it's something that is against our nature as decent human beings. And plus, if you kill them,
all we need to do is defend ourselves against the psychotic killers who are walking the streets, and make them not walk the streets, and then you're safe.
Well, unfortunately, the police in this case, even though they may be psychotic killers, they have the idea of legitimacy in most people's eyes, and you will be seen as the threat if you use violence to fight back against them. Plus, if you kill the people who killed this man, then his family could never possibly receive any restitution
they
from
can get
those
it from
individuals.
The state.
Well,
what is the state? I mean, the state is you and me.
Yeah, the taxpayers.
That's not
It's
not
me.
a solution.
I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out.
You're paying rent. That means you're paying the property taxes. That means you're paying the salary of the police. Go ahead, Major.
So anyway, you guys are going to throw me off topic here. Last night I tried to apprise you of this story, but we ended up talking about the A&W bear in his root beer pants.
Okay.
But let's see. Oh yeah, I just heard I heard a news blip from police department representative from New York, and they were saying, we will defend anybody's right to peacefully assemble and
liar.
And what I'm thinking is, when are the Trailways buses rolling in with Black Lives Matter and all the rest of this foolishness going to start? But now this is a black on black issue. And the thing is, it's named the Scorpion Unit. Now, the biggest scorpion I can think of is the black one.
What's the Scorpion unit you're talking about?
It's a shock troop to go after the hood rats that are stealing cars and whatnot down there in Memphis.
Oh.
And the cops even there are up, or the governor's up in arms, and the people are definitely up in arms about wanting to just...
No, they're not up in arms. When you're up in arms, it means you have a gun in your hand and you're in the street. That's what up in arms means. You're armed. You're out there. You've got torches. You've got pitchforks. And you've decided to make it stop.
I think he means figuratively, but...
I'm trying to tell you, and you're splitting hairs. And you do this
okay. I'll do that. I hate rabbits. I was a much nicer person before they threw me in prison.
They don't have rabbit hairs anymore. They're all gone up here. Big white snowshoes. Yeah, I haven't seen one for 20
I used
years.
to live in Michigan.
There's still some hairs around here.
I don't know what took them out, but yeah, the hairs are no more.
I see them jumping through our backyard from time to time up here. But go ahead. What else did you have?
Well, just that this is going to be a test on humanity as far as, will black flies matter, and the trailways and rented buses and whatnot show up with all the imported rioters?
That's a good question. That is a good question. Thank you, Major Payne, for the call tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been to 3 Black Lives Matter rallies that I can think of. It might have been 4.
It was at least 3 that we went to together.
There was absolutely no violence. There was, they were well ordered. They were well done, well presented. And at each one of them, they did make a point of saying, we're not saying that only Black Lives Matter. What we're saying is that when you said all men are created equal, you didn't include us. And when you said liberty and justice for all, you didn't include us. So when you say all lives matter, it's not as clear as you might think it is. So we'd like to get a little bit of clarification. And I think that is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, the thing that I liked about the Black Lives Matter event here in Keene specifically was that it was targeted at the police. It was targeted at them. They were not being friendly towards the police, even though the police were there trying to act friendly at the event. The speakers were specifically not a fan of the police state and the police system. And then what we ended up seeing in Manchester was...
And I gotta say, Keene KPD is like... they're grade A swine as swine go. They're probably the best cops that I've ever interacted with.
They tend to be a little bit better than your average city cops. That's for sure.
Yet they're still part of the system that is designed to make sure that we cannot escape their control.
But what ended up happening was Manchester also had kind of similar vibes as Keene, but with, a little bit more people, although Keene was very well attended. I think hundreds of people were packing. I'd never seen anything like that in Keene. But then Nashua, the whole thing had been completely co-opted. If you remember,
politicians took it over.
Yeah, there was like the mayor and the city councilor and the police chief were up there speaking at the Nashua one. So the whole thing had become political. And it was over at that point.
I remember that. We were standing there smoking weed and COVID was just starting. And we were coughing and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to get lynched.
So let's see. Let me give you a little more information here because, what we've seen is these protests, they haven't resulted in any significant changes, which is, of course, typical with protest.
I maybe not a qualitative change, but there has been a quantitative change. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. They burned down the police station in Minneapolis, and guess what? The guy who murdered George Floyd, where's he? He's in prison.
That's true. And that is true.
It's interesting that when you start hurting them, they want to make that stop. And they change their behavior. It's not just the peasants that react to punishment. It's also our lords and masters.
Well, it's not the. It is true that it seems like they are prosecuting police more often since George Floyd in these circumstances,
and it's not happening as often. We were getting a case like this every month for a while.
You think that's true? Or are we just not seeing the stories?
Yeah, I mean,
that is a difference, because there was I'm gonna get off onto a conspiracy theory here for a moment, if you don't mind. Because of Cop Block and the Free Thought Project and Cop Watch and all of the various Police to Police, all these various groups that I watch and pay attention to. I'm pretty aware of cases of police brutality that come down the line. I've been soaking in it like Palmolive. And normally the media does exactly what you would expect the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex to do, which is cover up official wrongdoing. But right around the time of Ferguson, just before Ferguson, all of a sudden they started not just reporting these cases, but pushing them. You know how the media pushes a case?
Sure.
When it becomes a propaganda directive from above, like they pushed a lot of the COVID things, they started pushing police brutality. And I remember thinking, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
Well, what I didn't notice until later is that they were only pushing cases with black victims. For example, during the middle of the whole Black Lives Matter thing came the murder of Lemp.
Duncan Lemp.
Duncan Lemp. Thank you. His name was Duncan Lemp.
The guy got shot in his sleep, right?
Yeah. They killed him in his bed, 6 inches from his pregnant girlfriend. They didn't even bother to come in and say hi first. They just shot him through the wall.
Yep. You think they'd wake somebody before they shot him, you know?
It seems reasonable to say, I kind of thought Malcolm Reynolds had the right idea when he said, if I shoot you, you'll be awake, you'll be standing, you'll be facing me, and you'll be armed.
It's interesting because this is not something that's uncommon, or that sort of thing. They're supposed to announce usually, unless they have a no-knock warrant. And even in the Crypto 6 case, we saw the same thing. There was no announcement, there was no knocking. They just
kicked down the door.
They just kicked the door down, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not the way it was supposed to be done.
But that's how terrorism works. It's not terrorism if you don't come on like a terrorist.
Yeah.
But anyway, where I was going with this thing is, so all of a sudden they started pushing stories of police brutality with black victims. At the same time, the police are refusing to even keep any kind of order where these rallies are going on, so you have people burning down buildings. Now, of course, what's going to happen when the police abdicate their responsibility? The militia's going to show up because that's what they're supposed to do. And then you get things like Kyle Rittenhouse, who, the big mistake there was he was alone walking down the street. Never should have happened, but he was a 17-year-old kid, and apparently he got accidentally separated from the guy he was with, and then the police would not let him through their line to get back to his unit. So he's stuck out there by himself, almost got him killed, did get 2 people killed.
Right.
But I was thinking maybe that was by design, because there's 2 groups of people in America that have the balls to stand up to the police. One, January 6th. The other one is Black Lives Matter. Well, what do you do when you're faced with 2 enemies that aren't afraid to fight?
You turn them against one another.
Get them to fight each other. Imagine if the 3 guys that Kyle Rittenhouse shot had been black. The fact that all 3 of them were whiter than me is the best evidence I have ever seen that there's actually a God. Because if he'd gone in there and shot 3 black guys, it would have been a war between the militia and the black community at large, I think.
Yeah, there were even so many people wanted to believe he'd shot a black guy. There were people in like the leftists or whatever that were looking at that story.
Oh, they would swear up and down they were black, and it's like, dude.
Nope. Wasn't the case.
Yeah, but I think that was exactly what they wanted, and it was just bad luck for the deep state that the psychos who tried to lynch Kyle Rittenhouse happened to be light.
Yeah, well, and in this case now we've got psychos who happen to be black killing a black man in Memphis, Tennessee. And the footage is out now.
It would be so nice if we didn't even have to think about, what color was he, or what was his shoe size.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, this was a blue-eyed guy, and that was a brown-eyed guy, and it's like, who the hell cares?
Yeah, isn't there like an expression like hate knows no color or something like that, or color knows no hate?
Could be,
yeah.
But in this case, it's power. I mean, this is whether these men hated this guy or they just wanted to hurt somebody. I don't know. And so you've got a 29-year-old black gentleman who has died now 3 days after officers beat and pepper sprayed him. According to Huffington Post, the footage is out. I have posted it at social.freetalklive.com on the @FTL account if you want to go and check it out. It is pretty graphic. There's 4 different angles, 3 police body cams, 1 wide angle. It gives a graphic depiction of officers demanding Nichols get out of a car following a questionable traffic stop of the unarmed man. Nichols, the gentleman is Tyre Nichols, is heard shouting, "I didn't do anything," as officers approach him with guns pointed at him. Officers can be heard shouting multiple.
And just for the record, if you happen to be, if any of our FBI agents are watching or are listening,
they are.
You might want to mention to the police that you never point a gun at a person until after you decide to shoot them. So maybe you would have fewer murders that you are responsible for if you followed the basic rules of firearm ownership.
Well, in this case, he didn't get shot, but they did just about everything else they could to him. An officer threatens to taser Nichols, who replies to them to stop while he's on the ground surrounded by the officers. "Bitch, put your hands behind your back before I break you," one officer said. Another officer says he's going to knock Nichols the F out, threatening more force as the young man is lying on the ground. Nichols tells police at one point...
Why do people run away from the police? Oh, because they're psychotic thugs.
Nichols says to him at one point, "You guys are really doing a lot right now. I'm just trying to go home." Officers can then be seen pepper spraying Nichols and tasing him as he shouts again, quote, "I'm not doing anything." At one point, he shouts for his mother in the video. He is a was a FedEx worker, because he's dead now, who was known for his love of skateboarding. He was arrested after he was
He's really good, too. I saw a video of him today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Arrested after he was pulled over for alleged reckless driving. Officers have said he fled the scene on foot.
Those pigs are calling somebody else's behavior reckless.
Yeah. Right. They claim that he fled the scene on foot and was captured. Nichols told officers he was experiencing shortness of breath and was hospitalized with serious injuries. He then died January 10th. The police have not disclosed the cause of death, but Nichols' family said he suffered from cardiac arrest and kidney failure. His family alleges the arresting officers beat and pepper sprayed him and shocked him with a stun gun. Well, they don't need to allege it anymore. It's right there in the footage that has come out. They did all of those things to him.
And people still say, why do you need an AR-15? Why do you need 15 bullets in a clip? Well, 5 cops, and just out of basic respect, if you're going to give somebody a shot, give them 3.
Yeah,
that's 15.
I get where you're coming from with the anger, nobody, but I don't think violence is the answer here.
I just got to vent.
You're being expressive, but it's I don't know that it's helping the situation.
I don't think it's going to help people to do that. I get the frustration. It seems like this is.
I'm just so sick of it. It's on and on and on
Yeah.
and over and
until
over
people
and over.
are willing
and
to.
None of the lords and masters care, because none of the lords and masters are ever impacted or even inconvenienced.
Yeah, the thing is, these guys are ready for violence. They train for that. They've got SWAT teams for that. That's what they're preparing.
But there's 200 of us for every one of them.
No, that's the problem. There aren't 200 of us. If we had 200 of us for every one of them, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that they have like brainwashed and manipulated the public to such a degree that it's like 10 of them and one of us.
Yeah, most of the people, despite all of these stories, despite all the horrific video and all of the examples of police just abusing and murdering people, there's still so many people that just trust everything they say. It just seems to have no effect on them. They just tell themselves, oh, it's just a few bad apples. And then they go on to believe that the police are somehow this great organization, this full of honorable people. But until there are, and if you got 200 of us to each one of them, if we could get those numbers, for instance, here in New Hampshire, which, could be possible if we had thousands more people migrate here. But even if we had those numbers, then you still don't need violence, because you can then just stop paying for this. You can then just end the support financially for these people.
The problem is, what happens if you end the financial support is...
They go home if they don't get paid.
Well, the thing is, they just go in and take one guy's house. Now, at the point that they take one guy's house, you've got two choices, okay? You either stop them from taking it, okay? At which point they're going to try to kill you and you're going to have to fight back. Or you don't stop them from taking it, and they just keep taking and auctioning homes until they've got enough money to continue their reign of terror. So basically,
it's a pretty bad system.
At some point, somebody still has to fight.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but I don't think that's the solution. I think that we need to.
I don't think it's. I think we need to come up with more creative. My prediction of what's going to happen.
Well, that tends to be what people do. Is they do tend to tend towards violence.
I think the answer to the thing, it's more like figuratively we need to fight, absolutely, but I don't necessarily know we need to use actual violence.
There needs to be more creative solutions, whether it be legislatively, as Rob was suggesting earlier, if we can somehow defang the police legislatively, make it so they can't tax sale homes that are delinquent on property taxes, that kind of thing. Those things could help that situation. But a little bit more about...
What usually happens is there's a moment like Lexington and Concord where, the jackbooted thugs, the redcoats, showed up to take the guns, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to either show up and say you can't do that, or they're going to render us helpless, and we'll just be more slaves. So they showed up, and of course the cops started shooting at them, because that's what cops do, and they shot back. Actually, I think the colonists were massacred at Concord and Lexington, but the next group of colonists learned something from the massacre of their countrymen, and they responded with force, and eventually they won their freedom.
Yeah, but look what they created.
Well, they did create it, but there were some relatively good years. I mean, if I had a choice between 1776 America and America today, and I wasn't going to be black, then I would say I would choose back then. Of course, then I'd probably be out there with John Brown getting myself killed anyway. But
Monday, Nichols' family, accompanied by a civil rights attorney, viewed the body camera footage. The traffic stop happened 2 minutes from his home, which is why he was calling for his mother while he was on the ground being beaten by the police. Said he was beaten
only he had cell 411
within 80 yards of where he lived. Crump described the videos as deplorable and heinous during a Monday press conference. We'll tell you a little bit more about this latest police beating of a man who was completely unarmed and relatively, young and skinny. More coming up.
Free Talk Live.
The DEA doesn't dabble with users. They go after the big dogs.
Yeah, and I'm certain they have dabbled with users, and they would if they thought they could get
DEA?
something. They would if they thought they could get somewhere with it.
Maybe a user who's snorting 3 pounds a week, something where they could actually connect to a player.
Yeah.
But most users are just buying from other users. I mean, in the cocaine world, when you are a user, you've got to support your habit somehow.
Right.
And if you're not willing to go and knock over convenience stores and break into people's cars and hurt people to get the cash for your habit, then the only other choice for you, if you're not wealthy, is to sell cocaine to others.
Right.
And so most people will go and pick up whatever amount of coke they do, and then they'll sell to certain specific people who are their friends. Like he was saying, he was selling to his neighbor across the street. The DEA is not going to mess with that.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, D.C., I'm Benji Hire. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The US condemned Friday night's shooting, standing, the State Department says, with the Israeli people in solidarity. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel and the West Bank later this month at a time of increased tensions, exacerbated since 9 Palestinians, including militants and some civilians, were killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. Elsewhere, the American city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing the footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. 29-year-old Tyree Nichols passed away 3 days after he was pulled over and beaten by 5 black officers earlier this month. Those officers have all been fired and charged with second-degree murder, assault and kidnapping. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Shelby County Courthouse.
There is no doubt here in Memphis that the egregiousness of this video, its staggering brutality, will bring people to the streets. What Tyree Nichols' family, law enforcement, and community leaders are asking for are for those protests to be peaceful. At this point, officials say they have no indication that violence is planned, but they are on guard. There is an increased police presence in the city. The few people who have viewed this video, including law enforcement and Tyree's family, have described it as heinous, inhumane. The family's lawyer saying that Tyree was beaten like a piñata. Tony Waterman, Memphis, Tennessee.
Voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls to choose their new president over the course of Friday and Saturday. Former Prime Minister and billionaire populist Andrej Babiš is up against pro-Western candidate and the contest's favourite, Petr Pavel, a retired army general. Both men failed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. It's 50 years to the day since the Paris Peace Accords, signed in the French capital, officially ended the Vietnam War, prompting an immediate ceasefire and the eventual withdrawal of American troops. Friday also marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the annual memorial for the 6 million Jewish people killed under Nazi persecution during the Second World War. The United Nations held a series of events and a ceremony in memory of the victims. From the UN's headquarters, Sally Patterson reports.
January 27th marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. It also remembers those killed in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Sally Patterson, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at heightened tensions between Greece and Turkey. The Turks are accusing the Greeks of provocative actions over their armament of some disputed islands in the Aegean. Ankara has protested the move, saying it breaches agreements signed in 1923 and 1947. But the Greeks have won US backing, with the Biden administration proposing to sell Athens F-35 fighter jets. Stephen Cook of the US-based Council on Foreign Relations says the domestic politics of Turkey, where a presidential election will take place in May, is playing into the current uptick in rhetoric.
The Turks really have engaged in this rhetoric and warning that the Greeks are arming these islands in violation of international treaties. A lot of this is really electoral game playing, that President Erdogan is in the unusual position. He's relatively politically weak going into polls. In head-to-head races with a number of other leading politicians, he loses. So he's been pushing every button and pulling every possible lever to garner support. And, Turkish nationalism is one of those things. And the Aegean and the Greeks are an obvious place to push these buttons and pull these levers.
But the Greeks and the Turks have come close to war 3 times in the last half-century, with disputes over both territory and human rights continuing to simmer between them. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
A reminder of our top stories. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The US city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. And voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls on Friday and Saturday to choose their new president. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington, D.C.
It's the video sensation that's taking the internet by storm. A web series on YouTube passed the 100 views mark this week. Titled Andrew and John, the wildly popular webisodes feature roommates Andrew Vanier and John Haney playing fictionalized versions of themselves in unusual situations, mostly set in and around their Chicago apartment.
Dude, did you get my tart? What's a tart? Oh, you just texted me a fart.
Their latest short, titled Laundry Day, reached the unprecedented 100-view milestone this week after a heavy promotional push in which the duo posted the skits to their Facebook pages. The hit video features the roommates wearing unconventional outfits while scrounging up enough change to do laundry in their basement. Other popular episodes include Foreign Landlord, featuring John's friend Brett from work, and a video where Andrew suspects John might be a zombie.
Our videos consistently get over 50 views now, but Laundry Day, that's the first one that's really taken off.
Yeah, everyone I know has seen it.
It's completely viral.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live
is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Police officers in Memphis, Tennessee have beaten a man to death. And it's worth pointing out here that it was a black-on-black incident, meaning all black officers and a black gentleman who seemed to pose no real threat to these guys. Okay, so the guy that we're talking about here, his name...
They had no reason.
...is Tyre Nichols. He was 29. He's dead now. He was going home. He was about 80 yards from his house in a car, apparently, when the officers pulled him over. He did apparently flee the scene initially because, well, maybe he discovered that these guys were dangerous psychopaths and wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Although that does tend to make matters worse when it comes to jacked up cops.
Well, they were wearing their psychopath suits, so they were easy to recognize.
Sure, but my point is, when the cops are dangerous, if you run from them, it tends to give them the excuse to use even more force than they otherwise had done.
Yeah.
So I'm not blaming.
If you're going to run from the police, run very, very fast,
and don't let them catch you.
Don't let them catch you.
I'm not blaming Mr. Nichols here for what he did. I don't blame anybody in that circumstance, but it generally doesn't go real well when you take that route. And so they ultimately beat him to within inches of his life, apparently. He was taken out of the scene alive to a hospital where he died 3 days later from the injuries the police had given to him, which included not only pepper spraying multiple times while he was on the ground, by the way, multiple
handcuffed.
officers. And I don't know if he was handcuffed at that point, but he was being held down by at least 2 officers. There were at least 4 officers that were on the scene. He was pepper sprayed. He was tasered. He was kicked what appears to be in the head at least twice. He was hit in the head, like punched in the face multiple times. I counted at least, I watched more of the video here, I counted at least 5 shots straight to the head while this guy was being held.
Did you guys see, you guys watched the whole video?
I've watched a good chunk of it here. I mean, the whole video doesn't... There's a lot longer in the video than the actual action that happens.
What I'm wondering is if he ended up unconscious, or he lost consciousness, and if they kept beating him after.
I'm not clear on that.
Okay, that's why I was wondering if you had watched the whole video.
I don't know if that's the case. If you've watched the whole thing and you want to comment on that, you can here. The number 603-283-6160. I kind of looked at some of the police body cam footage, and some of it you can see the hits, but others, the cops facing another direction or whatever. But the wide shot is where you get to see the actual every single thing that they do to him, but you can't hear the audio on the wide shots. You can't hear. But most of the time I was watching it, he is responding. He is screaming. He's yelling for his mother.
Right.
He's hurt. He's yelling at that he's being harmed.
Was it Terry Schiavo?
Schiavo was the woman who was on her deathbed.
That's right. There was a homeless guy out in Arizona, Terry something, who he was retarded and he was homeless and he I saw a video of his father and it was just heartbreaking.
What happened to him?
He was beaten to death by police.
Okay.
And screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, help me!" And it just reminds me of that.
Memphis Police Chief Saralyn C.J. Davis called out the footage in the beating of Nichols as incomprehensible and said the videos are, quote, about the same, if not worse, unquote, than the images of the 1991 assault of Rodney King by police in Los Angeles. The Memphis Fire Department confirmed to Huffington Post that 2 employees involved in the initial patient care of Nichols were relieved of duty pending an ongoing investigation. Desmond Mills Jr., Justin Smith, Tardarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Emmett Martin III were identified as the officers involved in Nichols' deadly arrest. They are part of the Memphis Police Department's Scorpion Squad, which stands for Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, well, one more person resting in peace, I guess. Mission accomplished.
That choice of words is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
This is murder. I mean, this is
anything but peace.
Yeah, I mean, this is a killing. This is an unwarranted
It's
killing.
completely unjustified.
Yeah.
Like, if this guy was some sort of hulking linebacker from the NFL or something like that, maybe you could justify the use of force needed to take him down, but certainly not the continued...
still wouldn't need to keep beating him after he was handcuffed.
Not the continued beating. I don't know if he was beaten after he was handcuffed. I'm not sure if that happened in this video. I wouldn't go so far as to say that. But this guy was not a threat at all to these officers. He was a 29-year-old skinny dude. I mean, this guy couldn't be more than 150 pounds, maybe 160, soaking wet. I mean, he was...
And when you consider that they beat him all the way to death, at some point during the beating, he was half dead.
Yeah, if not more.
Well, all the way down to completely dead.
Yeah.
Well, remember, he died 3 days later in the hospital, so he did leave the scene alive.
He must have been pretty close
but
when
they
he
messed
left
him
the
up
scene.
pretty bad. The police squad was introduced by Davis, the same person who called the beating incomprehensible, and 2021 is tasked with handling violent crimes in the area. Memphis Police Department announced Friday that following an internal investigation, all 5 officers involved in the arrest have been fired for violating department policy and practices, including those pertaining to excessive force. They've all been charged with second-degree murder by a grand jury. So that's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
But this may be as a result as due to the George Floyd situation, where we've seen the police
because
are more likely
people fought back. And they don't care if bad things happen to other people. They love doing bad things to other people. But when bad things happen to them, when a guy walks up to a couple of New York City pigs and just shoots them in the face, as happened during the Black Lives Matter thing, they start thinking, but wait, something could happen to me, and that's the one human being that matters to a psychopath.
It's, this is kind of interesting, is it's very unusual for a prosecutor to it's kind of crazy, but you think when a prosecutor brings does the grand jury stuff with these cops, that the grand jury, because it's basically what is the expression, you could convict a ham sandwich is the expression.
They indict, not convict.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, indict.
Which the solutions then, because they have such a hard time indicting cops, slice them thin, put them on some bread, spread some mustard
He's
on
joking.
them, and then indict them.
Just a joke.
Yeah. I mean, but they can. It's so easy to indict somebody even when there's no evidence. It's like, why is it so hard to indict a cop? And it's because the prosecutors
try.
The prosecutors don't. They
won't do it.
They don't want to.
They won't do it. They're their buddies.
Yeah, they're buddies.
But they did it here. They did all 5 of them on not just manslaughter charges, but actual second-degree murder charges.
Which is why it's so unusual.
I'm really curious as to whether the prosecutor offered second-degree murder to them, or if people on the grand jury just knew that what second-degree murder was.
How does that work? Can the grand jury just make their own decision about what charge to indict on?
That's the prosecutor that does that.
Yeah, I think that's the prosecutor's job.
I think they can I think they can indict people that the prosecutor hasn't even asked for an indictment against, if the mood takes them. But I don't know.
If you know and you want to weigh in here, the number is 603-283-6160. But I understand what you're saying, Nobody, about the officers, psychopaths, being afraid for their own lives if something happens to one of them. But I don't think that what you were talking about, where somebody shot at a cop in New York City, is a good plan. Because
I don't think it's a good plan, but
and I don't think it's right either.
Even if it's a bad plan, it is. Causes have effects.
Yeah, but I don't think
if you don't like the cause.
Yeah, I don't think it's right either, though, because you don't know who we're talking about here. I mean, these are very specific officers,
and it's probably not right. I wouldn't have a word of criticism if this kid's father decided to go, whack the 5 cops who murdered his son. I don't know how he's going to do it because
they're out on bond. That's the next part of the story. All 5 of them.
Bond.
All 5 of them are out on bond. I agree with you there, Nobody. I would not shed a tear.
No,
if that were to be the case.
I would not shed a tear.
And I would probably not vote him to be guilty if I was on his jury either.
I absolutely would not.
Are we talking about the cop?
No, the kid's father.
No. He said,
gotcha.
I was saying hypothetically, if the kid's father went and whacked these 5 cops.
Oh,
the Memphis Department.
I would not vote guilty. Not in a million years.
The Memphis Police Department announced Friday, following an internal investigation, all 5 have been charged. Shelby County records say the officers were additionally charged with 2 counts of official misconduct, 1 count of official oppression, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping. And then all 5 released on bond. Activists and supporters gathered for a vigil for Nichols Thursday night in Memphis. An independent autopsy reviewed by his attorney and another attorney indicated that Nichols, quote, suffered extensive bleeding caused by the severe beating. On Friday, Crump and Romanucci demanded the Memphis Police Department dismantle the Scorpion unit. A photograph of Nichols in a hospital bed showed him with a swollen eye and other parts of his face disfigured. His family said his face was unrecognizable. Activists displayed the photo during protests in Memphis, urging officials to release the footage of the arrest, which has now happened within just hours ago. It was just this afternoon that the footage came out, and it has been handed over to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The Department of Justice and the FBI have announced a civil rights investigation into Nicholas's death, as though that's going to result in anything. But there you have it. That is the latest on the situation.
It might at least result in some money for the family.
Perhaps.
That's something.
Perhaps. The number, if you want to join the show here at 603-283-6160. Joe is on the line in Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, how you doing, everybody?
Hey, what's on your mind?
What's up?
After this incident, I've come to the conclusion this country's broken and it's beyond repair.
Yes, sir.
There's really not much more to say about that.
I'll add 2 words. National divorce.
There you go.
NH exit, man.
Yeah. All the exits.
Yeah, for sure.
50 exits.
Well, if I can get my act together, I am going to move up there to Keene.
Good.
I'm glad to see you. I'll be glad to have another person.
We'll leave a light on for you.
We need as many people as we can
need
get.
Thousands more like-minded, liberty-oriented people who are serious about making change, because there's just no chance. We actually had some people visiting today. There was a gentleman from New York State who's considering leaving New York. Sounds like he's really seriously planning. It sounds like he's planning to leave New York.
Yeah. How can people still be in New York?
They have jobs, they have families. It's hard to tie up loose ends and clean things up. But there was another woman
I forgot I've got bum privilege.
Another lady from Boston was talking about moving up here as well. But yeah, people need to stop talking and start planning and get this thing done, because time is of the essence here. The longer we remain part of this union, the more it's going to drag us down into economic ruin, if not worse.
And the other thing is, the next time they genetically engineer a virus, maybe they don't allow interstate travel.
They already experimented with that during COVID. Florida shut down their border. They had troopers stationed on the major roads coming into Florida.
So much for DeSantis and freedom.
Yeah. He's full of it. The people that support him, they've conveniently forgotten that DeSantis locked down the state, and DeSantis did all kinds of things to restrict people until he realized it would be more politically feasible for him to undo it.
It's amazing also how many people that think that warp speed was a Biden thing. No, that was Trump.
What was warp speed?
Warp speed was the development of the virus, or the
vaccine.
The vaccine that was so good it didn't need to be tested.
Yeah, and Trump is, by the way, still patting himself on the back for that. So by no means is Trump some sort of anti-vax COVID critic. He loves the vaccine.
Which is strange, because at one point he believed that the reason that Barron was autistic was vaccines.
Until he got elected, you mean?
Yeah.
All right, Joe, what else, man?
Okay. All I got to say is nobody, Ian, Bonnie, Aria, always in my prayers, plus the rest of the Free Talk family in my prayers, and even Sarah. So thanks a lot, everybody. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the call tonight. I appreciate it. And he said this was what pushed him over the edge to believing that this country is done for. And everybody's got their line, everybody's got something that's going to be their final straw on their back. And so whenever we talk about as you said, national divorce, whenever we discuss the issue of peaceful independence for New Hampshire or Texas or any other state that wants to pursue that, there's always some pushback, there's always some objections, there's always people who aren't ready for it. But you give those people 3, 4, 5, 6 more months, and then they may be ready for it. There may be something that the local or federal governments do that makes them say, you know what, especially the federal government, that it's time to say goodbye, that it's time to end this relationship.
And they're so terrified that somebody's going to stand up for himself. But it doesn't even occur to them, if you don't want somebody to stand up for themselves, you don't back them into a corner and keep them there so they have no choice.
Yeah, you're asking to get bitten if you back a dog into a corner.
Give people an escape. You don't have to own every human being on Earth.
Tell that to the World Economic Forum. Let's go to Saheed in Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Saheed.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
Just listening to the conversation. I haven't watched the video or anything, but just having some conversation on the Matrix chat. And one thing that got brought up is I think Moses is a perfect example of kind of like the both sides of the kind of like argument, like whether they go ahead and do violence or kind of like just leave and exit.
You said
and,
Moses?
do your own thing.
The biblical figure?
Yes, Moses yes.
Why is that?
Because it was all about slavery and oppression and a tyrant kind of like system involved, different races.
Can you recap the story for me? I honestly don't know what you're referring to.
But well, in the Quran it's a little bit different than presented a little bit differently than in the Bible, but it goes through the basics, the exact same story. So Moses was raised by Pharaoh way back in the day, but he was a Jew, and the Jews were oppressed, and basically oppressed and slaves at the same time, because there are some Jews who are actually in power as well, like Karun or something like that, who were like right-hand man of Pharaoh. And so like basically you had a bunch of different races pitted against each other, and they basically uphold like this, Pharaoh system to kind of keep them at the top, exactly like a pyramid. And then Moses was sent. Moses went ahead and actually did violence against one of the guys and killed them to protect one of his race, basically. And that's how it's like laid out inside the Quran. That's a little bit differently than in the Bible.
Okay.
And then he had to leave. And then after years of being away, he went ahead and got in contact with God. And then he had to come back and basically teaches people who were basically had a lot of slave mentality to kind of like quit trying to, compete in this system and let's get out of here, and so it's kind of like a lot of, and he had to go ahead and communicate with the people who he was raised with as well. And so, because he was kind of like from both sides. In the end, God led them out through, that's where the, a lot of the story is focused on. But I like the general story because I think it's very.
Oh, is he the one that parted the Red Sea or whatever?
Yeah. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people
okay.
go.
Yeah, I'm a little rusty on my Bible.
I actually sang that song in church one time as a solo.
Moses is actually the most mentioned prophet in the Quran, and so there's like a lot of focus and a lot of different perspectives involved in his story, and so it's something that we reflect on a lot.
Okay.
And
you're saying that relates to what's happening today?
Yeah, I'm saying about the violence, whether to go with violence or to go ahead and exit a tyrannical and oppressive system. And I think there's a lot of lessons in there to kind of like how to deal with the people who are in the oppressed side and how to deal with the people who are on the, who are oppressors as well. Especially when you, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned on many sides here because, that's how societies are built. It's like societies are built on, or at least, a lot of these, especially when one's built on violence, it has all these dynamics going on, and they're hard to work out.
Well, unfortunately, the big difference between then and now is that you can't just walk away right now. You can go to New Hampshire if you're a liberty-minded person and you're located within the United States. If you're outside of the United States, it's significantly more difficult. Although there are ways for those who are willing to get married to somebody here or something like that.
I'm still single.
Yeah, but. That's the solution. There's no empty land at this point that you can just go on to.
Israel wasn't empty.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. That's like the other side of it. I mean, it's not like there was. They had to wander around in the wilderness for a good bit, but that's not a place you can kind of like build a society. But plenty of them did go ahead and part ways on their journey there to Israel. And that's actually another big difference between the Quran and the Bible. Is like the wandering around in the Bible was for some odd reason. I don't remember exactly. But in the Quran, the reason why they're not able to
40 years
that they had to wander around for 40 years was because they would not fight the Philistines that were, or not. They actually don't have a name, but they wouldn't fight who was in Israel to kind of like basically it's an interesting story, but basically that's why they were wandering for 40 years inside the Quran because they refused to fight. And then they went ahead and decided that they wanted a king instead.
Somebody ought to find out why they wouldn't kill them and tell the Palestinians. Maybe they can solve their problem.
Saheed, was there more you wanted to share?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about Cop Block and Cell 411 because I think that's also super relevant to this, conversation as well.
What was it you wanted to ask?
Oh, I was just wondering about how Cop Block's doing and the Cell 411 and
Cop Block basically doesn't exist anymore. It kind of went under when its founders essentially retired. And no one really wanted to pick up the ball and kind of keep it going. The site still exists, last I checked, but it wasn't being updated on any sort of regular occurrence. It was passed along to somebody who bought the website on an auction site, and they didn't even know what they were buying. But Cell 411 may have a future.
There
perhaps.
is copblock.app, which is kind of a generic form of Cell 411. Right now, it's mostly a software project, but once it's finished, I'm hoping that an organization will form around it. So I'm working on it, but it's slow going.
I did see there was some chat in the official Cell 411 support chat rooms recently. It seemed like there was maybe a couple programmer types that might have been interested in, or at least one programmer type that was interested in working with you or testing things.
Yeah, I did see that and talk to that person, and basically I'm trying to get things into a state where I can explain them.
The code is open source now, and if you've got the programming chops and you want to help nobody with this program, go to getcell411.com, and you can find the links there in the menu to the chat rooms. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in Washington, D.C., I'm Benji Hire. At least 7 people have been shot dead and several left wounded at a synagogue in East Jerusalem in what Israel is calling a terror attack. The suspect, police confirm, has been neutralized. The US condemned Friday night's shooting, standing, the State Department says, with the Israeli people in solidarity. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Israel and the West Bank later this month at a time of increased tensions, exacerbated since 9 Palestinians, including militants and some civilians, were killed during an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank on Thursday. Elsewhere, the American city of Memphis is bracing itself for outrage and protests, with law enforcement releasing the footage of an encounter between police and a black motorist that ended in his death. 29-year-old Tyree Nichols passed away 3 days after he was pulled over and beaten by 5 black officers earlier this month. Those officers have all been fired and charged with second-degree murder, assault and kidnapping. Tony Waterman has more from outside the Shelby County Courthouse.
There is no doubt here in Memphis that the egregiousness of this video, its staggering brutality, will bring people to the streets. What Tyree Nichols' family, law enforcement, and community leaders are asking for are for those protests to be peaceful. At this point, officials say they have no indication that violence is planned, but they are on guard. There is an increased police presence in the city. The few people who have viewed this video, including law enforcement and Tyree's family, have described it as heinous, inhumane. The family's lawyer saying that Tyree was beaten like a piñata. Tony Waterman, Memphis, Tennessee.
Voters in the Czech Republic are heading to the polls to choose their new president over the course of Friday and Saturday. Former Prime Minister and billionaire populist Andrej Babiš is up against pro-Western candidate and the contest's favourite, Petr Pavel, a retired army general. Both men failed to secure a majority in the first round of voting. It's 50 years to the day since the Paris Peace Accords signed in the French capital officially ended the Vietnam War, prompting an immediate ceasefire and the eventual withdrawal of American troops. Friday also marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day, the annual memorial for the 6 million Jewish people killed under Nazi persecution during the Second World War. The United Nations held a series of events and a ceremony in memory of the victims. From the UN's headquarters, Sally Patterson reports.
January 27th marks the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest Nazi death camp. It also remembers those killed in subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Sally Patterson, New York.
From bureaus worldwide, this...
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. We got time for you if you want to join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Cell 411. As we just discussed a moment ago, you can go to getcell411.com. The app is in a I don't know what you would what do you call this state? Nobody. It's like it exists, but it isn't quite working correctly the last time I tried it.
Yeah, it's it goes up and down, and right now I've got another hunk of the guts out of it that I'm rearranging.
Okay.
And I'm throwing them back in, but it's in there. It does run if you check the right tag out. And are
you updating the code with the open source as you're making changes to it, so everybody else can see what you're doing?
Yes, it's
okay.
I continue to update the GitLab.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
account.
a good thing to have. Not only is it good to have a open source piece of software, it's also good to have an open development model.
Where people can, that's transparent, you mean?
Yeah, transparent, meaning that anybody can see what you're doing. Every time you write a patch, you submit that patch, and then everybody can see and test it and everything else, and modify it and work with it alongside you, as opposed to developing everything in-house and then releasing it when you're done with the new version.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I need to get more than just me involved.
Yeah,
because
most free software is not developed that way, but there are some products out there that are, not developed openly. That are open source or free software.
I have to wonder what other kind of avenues we have to reach out to folks. I mean, have we considered maybe emailing the user base to see if there's any programmers out there that would want to jump in and help out on this? Because it seems like you've been going this alone now for a couple of years. I mean, you spent 6 months in jail, so that set you back for some time. But if you've been asking for help, and it doesn't seem like much has arrived. I know there's been some financial support.
There has, and that helps.
But having an extra pair of eyes on things might not be a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. When's the release date?
That's a mean question. When it's done.
This is true. It is kind of a mean question. It is kind of a mean
question.
From
a software guy, you would know that it's when it's done. That's the answer, right?
Well, sometimes you just have to release stuff because it'll never be done if you don't.
Well, the release plan that I have now, because of kind of the situation I'm in, is basically to get a version up and running just on the Android side, talking to our servers rather than talking to Back4App, and then see if I can get a few people to just start using it. Okay. And I've got it set up so that it can coexist on your phone with the original Cell 411.
Is the original one still functioning? Does it actually work?
Last I heard it was, although I got one report of an issue, which I haven't been able to really reproduce, but probably I should throw it back on my phone and send out an alert tonight just to see what happens. So we've got a test group for that.
Let's ask you some questions, right? Okay, especially because I was being critical. So where does it stand, right? Like, is there a stable version or mostly stable version out there? Are you still working on?
There's the old
picking
version
out bugs where you've been developing all this past 6 months, and so it keeps getting delayed and pushed back.
Yeah, well, I've been developing, and the thing is,
so that's why it hasn't been released.
Yeah, and I've been
there's been some alphas or whatever you want to call them that have come out to the test group, and they've been they basically been failing on install.
If he's adding new features while at the same time releasing alphas, that's going to delay the release. So,
well, I'm not so much adding features as I'm kind of adding features. I'm refactoring. And
that means you're taking the old code and you're trimming it down, you're making it more efficient purportedly.
Yeah, and most importantly, more reliable.
And also transitioning from outside servers, third-party providers to roll your own kind of in-house servers.
And also getting it ready for the time when it will be able to talk to multiple servers. So I've actually rewritten a big hunk of the parse library.
You're looking to decentralize. You're looking to decentralize the software to some extent.
So maybe you've got a double secret probation group. Okay, and you don't want me seeing what's happening. Okay, well, if it's on my server, I can see it.
Right.
But you can. But once it's able to talk to multiple servers, you'll be able to set up a server just to run your one group.
Is this federated, or is this just totally two separate things with two separate servers? They can't talk to each other.
It would be a kind of in between, because your client would be talking to multiple servers, but when you sent a message to this particular group, you send it to the server that hosts that group rather than sending it to me.
Oh, so it's sort of more like it's kind of like a web browser.
It becomes a star pattern.
Yeah, it's kind of like
eventually my
web browser with multiple servers.
And eventually, if this fully goes to fruition, and it may not because there are other design possibilities, but what I'd like to have it is so that your information exists on your phone. Okay.
Instead of on a server.
Exactly. Instead of on a server, and then the only thing that the servers would be required to do is provide a place for you to rendezvous. So
isn't there a problem potentially with that, in that, for instance, my phone gets stolen by the cops, and then I get a new phone, now I've got to rebuild my friends list?
My solution to that actually is to give you the ability so that, say you've got a PGP key. You should never have your PGP key on your phone, by the way, because phones aren't trustworthy. But you've got a PGP key, say, on your desktop. So basically, set it up so that your friends just automatically have a copy of your database, but it's encrypted. They can't see what's in it.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
But they can return it to you, who has the key, and then you can open it up and use it.
I see.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I'm trying to think. It's sort of like a decentralized version of what is it? Edge Wallet. You know how they have the cloud backup feature for your
but it's encrypted.
Private key.
Except it's a peer-to-peer cloud.
It's right. Except in his case, it would be sent to multiple parties that are not a centralized server. But
what do you need right now? Nobody. You need testers for this thing more than anything else, or what?
Yeah, probably. Well, the thing that I most need now is to either is to get the current head version to a usable state. because I ripped some stuff out of it and I got to put it back in.
Okay.
But once I have that, then yes, the next thing will be to get some testers running off this server, just using it as a chat program, sending each other alerts, whatever, and then hopefully, and then basically once we get to that point, it's more or less released, and at that point, the big issue with this development cycle is there is just too much in it. If I could go back in time.
Well, plus you didn't build the thing, so you had to come in. It's always hard to come into somebody else's construction and figure out how it was made. Right?
Well, yeah,
so there's a big learning curve.
I didn't build the thing.
And you never knew how to phone program either.
Yeah, I'd never programmed a phone before. I did know Java, but I knew nothing about Android. I knew nothing about parse server. I didn't speak JavaScript.
Yeah, we basically were handed this thing, or purchased. The Shire Free Church purchased the sort of the debt that Cell 411 had from its creator. Basically, this thing was on life support. Essentially, we got the paddles out. We rubbed them together and put them on the body, the near corpse, and are trying to breathe some life back into it. So I mean, we're literally trying to bring this thing back nearly from the dead. So you had a real challenge on your hands, and still do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a lot closer than it was.
Okay.
So,
okay. Good. Good. If for anybody that wants to help out with this, if you know programming, if you know phone programming, if you are willing to be a tester, those are not the same category. You can be a tester without knowing programming. So if you like the idea of having a decentralized emergency response app, that is Cell 411. It has been very successful in the past for helping activist movements, police accountability movements, or just helping somebody that has an emergency where they need their friends to respond instead of psychopaths. You can go to getcell411.com, getcell411.com, click the little menu icon, and then you'll see there's a link to the source code. There's a link to go to the support matrix or the support telegram. So there's chat rooms on both of those platforms that I believe are connected together. So if you've got one preference or the other, just hop into it. And then nobody's in there a few times a week. Usually you'll stop in, I think, and check in and see if people are talking in there, and give whatever support you can. And the more people we can have with this, the better. The faster things will go.
I'll tell you, I watched the first minute of that video. I watched at home before I came.
Of the police beating?
Yeah, a couple hours ago. Yeah. And I was just thinking, oh, God, if only he had Cell 411 and he could hit a button and bring 50 of his closest friends.
That's the thing. You also need to have friends with Cell 411, because if you don't have any friends that have Cell 411, there's probably not going to be anybody showing up.
You know the one nice thing about Cell 411? It kind of demonstrates we're doing in New Hampshire what everybody else is talking about. We're developing applications, we're developing tools, we're doing stuff at a political level, at the state house. There's all sorts of different things that different people are doing that are making a difference. And this isn't just another one of those examples. It has the potential to make a difference.
Yep, and it can be used by anybody anywhere on the planet.
Yeah. And of course, the next thing, because once I've got this infrastructure done, it can be used for many projects. The second one I want to do is a distributed Tinder.
Okay.
With no central server, no way for anybody to know what anybody is doing. Oh, and by the way, each client has a Bitcoin wallet built in.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
And of course, a grinder as well.
Yeah, there's that button that says, I don't know. I'm trying to think what it should say, like tip, or what's the choice set of words that doesn't involve people ending up in a cage?
Well, I mean, in New Hampshire, the easiest way to arrange for that would be to make it, rather than making it a Tinder clone, you make it an app where you say, oh, okay, I want to produce a movie. I want to produce an adult movie. And so your phone sends out messages and says, "Oh yeah, well, you need an
actress.
You need actresses. You need squirrels. You need whatever it is you need for your little movie. And you can write the script, or you can buy a script from somebody if you want to, And so you know that your actress is prepared for exactly what she's getting when she shows up.
It could be a silent film. You don't have to have a script.
It could be a silent film.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, if you think it's a piece of crap, just delete it.
All right, let's go to the phones here. Once again, it's getsell411.com. Check out that tech there, and if you can help with it, I'm sure nobody and a lot of other people would appreciate your assistance. But let's go to Sarah. She's in New Mexico. You're on Free Talk.
Once you've got Tinder, though, Uber's easy also.
There you go. Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, yes. I've been coming to realize that the media, the television news, have blown things out of proportion with the free bus fare rides.
Is that the only thing they've blown things out of proportion on?
With the police duck bill
this
ride?
time I got caught
free bus fare.
I really. No, the most of the time I know that they blow everything up, but this time I got suckered in. Like I was believing that it's a shoplifting getaway vehicle and they're all sleeping on the bus and homeless people, and then they're beating up the bus driver, and then I was thinking back, and I was kind of thinking about all this, but I was like, wait a minute, they were always assaulting the bus driver, but back then when we paid, they were fighting and arguing them over the bus fare. You know what I mean? They would try to get on for free. They only had 50 cents. They needed $1.
So wait, you're saying that whether or not there's a charge to ride the bus, there's still violent lunatics on there?
Oh yeah, and then sleeping people on the bus, on the handicap, they just take up 3 feet.
Sleeping isn't particularly violent.
Did they get rid of? Let me understand this correctly. They got rid of the fee to ride the bus.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Why would you think getting rid of the fee to ride the bus would get rid of the violent lunatics?
Well, what I was saying, they drummed it up that it got even a lot more worse.
Oh, that would make sense.
The thing is I talked to the mayor's office, and then the data shows that it did not really go up that bad, except more people loitering in the bus shelters. There was that one bus route going to the mall. They used that route 155 as a getaway vehicle, but they blow it up like everybody's doing everywhere. And so there's people that they control the media. They're trying to deprive of people of getting free bus rides. There's more money going to the poor people. Like that's been more money. So they're manipulating it to.
So you think the people in the media want to stop people from taking the free bus rides?
I don't know. I think it's that's the element of it.
Why would they care? Why would KOB News care if poor people are taking a free bus ride or not?
I don't know about the news media takes that twist every which way, this way, and it gets manipulated. And
well, yeah, they do that. I mean, they want to get people to tune in to see the latest stabbing on the main bus line or whatever. I mean, they're going to do that. They're gonna make it sound more exciting than it actually was.
Let me ask you a question. Another question, Sarah. Did you say that a man used a bus as a getaway vehicle? Like he got on the bus and the bus driver drove off like it was regular route? It just seems like a crazy story.
Well, I mean, this is Albuquerque.
It'd suck if you didn't have exact change.
I mean, why wouldn't the cops just pull over the bus?
I have no idea because we don't have enough police.
The cops. I mean, if the guy robbed the place, they might not know, what he got.
So he kind of got away and then he hopped on a bus. I don't know if you call that a getaway vehicle.
Okay, the thing is that it turns out it's a
well, that's what she's saying. She's saying they're exaggerating. She's saying the media is exaggerating about this. Go ahead.
Right. They're making it. This is to oppose the free tax ride. It was just one route going to the mall, and those people that shop there, they would use that route, and they make it seem like everybody's using it everywhere.
But wait. Didn't you say that all of the buses are free, or are you just saying it's just the mall route?
No, all of them.
All of them are free. But what I don't understand, Sarah, is why you think the media is trying to stop people from riding the bus for free. Why would they care about that? Don't they want to have the stories about the terrible stuff that happens on the bus? Shouldn't that be there? Shouldn't they want more people to ride the bus so more bad stuff happens so they can report on it?
I don't know about that, but it's the same kind of like for example, KKOB, that radio station.
Mm-hmm.
Today they're beating up the free the lunch program. Every color that they took, but that's a Republican radio station. So I'm thinking that even the TV station has like a Republican bent, anything to scam money keep money away from going to the poor people. They'll have it. And that's where
it's not a matter so much of keeping money away from poor people. It's a matter of not having what you worked for stolen and used for something that was not of your choice. If somebody wants to pay for bus fares and that's the most important thing to them, then they should go out and work for their own bus fare rather than having a slave part-time.
Nobody. It's so. I think this argument is so disingenuous because it's like the reason that most people are poor is because the government has taxed them through other means. So they're mostly just getting their money back. And I'm not going to say that there isn't a small 1% of the population probably that was never going to was or certainly is getting more money than there is being taken from them by government, but. That can probably most of that can probably be covered by charity. It's just and the government in the process is taking a percentage for administration of those programs, and then of course there's intermediaries as well, which then has another costs, right? So, yeah, it just seems so disingenuous.
Yeah, it's
my whole
ingenuous, disingenuous.
Yeah, it's probably.
Here's the thing is that, but from my memory, those people are always fighting on the bus, grabbing women's butts, rubbing on me. Throwing rocks, beer cans, soda pop cans at bus drivers. Everybody trying to fight to beat the guys up that attack the bus. It's always been this way. I would get on the bus. There's people laying out, stretched out, sleeping away, snoring on the bus. Nothing has really changed any different. So,
no wonder those poor politicians don't have time to stop the cops from killing people if people are loitering in bus stops and sleeping on buses. Those are some serious problems they're up against.
Thank you, Sarah, for the call tonight. So it sounds like what she's saying is no matter what they do, the dregs are still on the city buses, making the rides for free hasn't changed it. Charging for the rides hasn't changed it. So, what are you going to do? I guess you could abolish the city buses.
Does it matter? Because if they're not on the bus, they're going to be beating somebody else up somewhere else.
It probably would make more sense to sell the buses off and let somebody else take over that business.
Let the market handle it?
Yeah, let the free market handle it. But yeah.
Well, right, because if there was actually enough of a demand for a bus, then the market would supply buses.
Right.
And somebody would make some money off of it.
Right.
Instead of it having to cost taxpayers through the nose.
But the thing is, that's frequently the flaw in their ointment is they say, oh, well, this is going to save the environment because it takes 5 times as much fuel or emits 5 times as much carbon as a passenger vehicle, but you can fit 10 times as many people.
But they're never full.
So instead, you're emitting 5 times as much carbon, and you got one bag lady in the back who would be just as happy sleeping somewhere else.
Mostly empty buses, yeah. It's definitely, it's funny because it's like there's definitely, I think, there's a market here, and there's an opportunity for somebody to make money, right? Now, it may not be every bus route, but I'm sure if there's enough demand, there would be somebody supplying it.
Yeah, it could just end up being a minivan driving around picking people up. It doesn't necessarily have to be a
more
full-size
cost effective
bus, right?
too if there's not enough people, taking a large big bus.
Let's go to the phones here. David,
so we get this app. Oh, sorry.
David in New Mexico. Go ahead.
Yeah, 38 minutes on hold. You got what? 1 minute left.
Do you want all of the minute or less than that?
Yeah, well, I'll take all of it. So what I'll do is I'll tell you that since there's 1 minute left or less than that, what I was going to tell you I'll save for a different day because 1 minute won't do justice to it, and I'll just speculate that you were discussing whether or not the family of the murdered kid in Memphis would receive monetary compensation. And I'll just speculate that within literally a month or two, that family will get a check for $10 million plus or minus because of the recent years' politics of these things. They will hand over the money real quickly without having to go to trial. They'll settle.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's your prediction? You're predicting that?
Yeah, that's my prediction. Okay. And the thing that I will tell you on a different program, because there's no time for it now, is something that you will disagree with. So
no, I won't.
Be prepared. Ian will, and hopefully he won't do what he usually does, which is cut me off when he disagrees with me.
Okay, what a teaser. We'll look forward to it. Thanks for the call tonight. Out of time for now. You can join Chris on his show. It is Freedom Decrypted, Saturdays around 5 o'clock Eastern Time, freedomdecrypted.com. Nobody's got Beer Talk Live coming up tomorrow night, 10:30 Eastern, over at watch.freetalklive.com. That'll take you right to our Odyssey streaming channel. And between now and tomorrow night, you can join us online anytime. Just head over to freetalklive.com. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS